Welcome to Journey Through the Gate, the Paranormal Portal podcast, as we delve into the many questions and wonders brought on by the supernatural experience. What's on the other side of the gate? Let's find out together. Almost got it. How you doing, everybody? Welcome, gatekeepers. I am so sparkly, and that is because my microphone. Can you guys hear me? 5-5. Everybody good? Hello, you lovely people. Wasn't that wonderful? I just left Steve too, and if you didn't get to catch that, get over there to Missing Persons and Mysteries and 13 Past Midnight and check out Steve and Sandy and all these wonderful stories. Hello, hello, hello. Without further ado, I'd like to bring in somebody here that it has been absolutely wonderful digging. Thanks, Uncommon Belief 5-5. Digging on things that you think you understand or you thought you had it, and then we start bringing, yeah, wasn't it, Lindsay? It was great. Steve's show was awesome. But we try to bring up, we really dig and bring up stuff that you may not have heard, or you may have heard a piece of it, and over time, things tend to get bent and warped, and, it's like that great game of telephone where everything just gets twisted, and I think it was... and as you get older and stuff like that, you might not remember. And, again, if you don't have the right information to begin with, and legends are born and stories are told. So we're going to do one tonight, but let me bring in this wonderful researcher, digger extraordinaire. He's got a golden shovel. And I'm so glad he chose to be on this show to dig with me. And can you dig it? I can dig it, because I know Donnie can dig it. Here we go, Mr. Donnie Cho. It's Sys-Cho tonight. How you doing, sweetie?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm going to try to get some of this sparkle. Is that a lot of sparkle? What's going on here? I'm going to try to fix this because it's driving me nuts. If I bring the microphone in enough for you guys to hear me... There we go. That's a little bit better. Is that a little bit better? Does that look better, guys? Is it good? Oh, yeah. It does look a little better. I don't know. What do you think, Donnie? I don't know what it's looking like on your side.
It's looking pretty good.
Oh, this
is
less
great. Sparkly.
So here we go. Jose, I love you so much, darling. I'll tell you what, Jose has been in so many chats. He's been with me. We were doing Lady Ann's radio channel. He's been, he goes... way back, and I absolutely love him, and he's always been very supportive and always commenting and stuff. We just love Jose. Are you kidding me? Salvador, Amy, all these wonderful people, Stephen Lewis, Glenn, Here's your Cisco. And how many people have seen the trucks that go by, and it'll say "Good things come from Cisco," or some of these other things. Those are all my trucks. Yes, that's they're talking about me. They're talking about this show. So just so I don't like to brag, but there you go. So what's up, Donnie? What do you have to say? I'm going to light some candles. So I thought, do you want to tell the chat what you told me or how you feel about tonight's subject and everything involved with it? What did you know going in?
Well, tonight's subject is going to be about Abraham Lincoln and the history around his life and his death, and with the Civil War. And I've always considered myself a fan of history, not really an expert, just someone who enjoys it. But 19th century America was one aspect of history that I didn't really pay much attention to. That's not where my interest in history lied, so I didn't really know much about it at all. Just what kids learn in school, essentially, was what I started with. And then Cisco told me a couple weeks ago that she wanted to do this topic, and then I was like, oh boy, I'm gonna have to research a whole bunch of stuff. So
Right, and Blue says Cisco's a major. Nobody's supposed to know that, Blue. I was trying to keep all that on the down low, as far as that. But when you go get straws at a restaurant, when you're eating, all that good fresh food and everything else, like they said, good things come from Cisco. I'm joking. I'm absolutely. You guys know that those aren't my trucks, right? But here's the thing: if you open your mind and I've got a great story about that. I'm not going to tell it now, but there have been times where I was like talking to spirit guides or just talking out to the universe and going, am I doing the right thing, or am I on the right path? And all of a sudden, here come this truck turning the corner. Good things come from Cisco. And I'm like, okay, I'll take that as a sign. So there you go. But so that being said, no, they're not my trucks. And no, I don't supply restaurants and things like that. I worked in quite a few of them. Yeah, they're all over the place. Absolutely. Absolutely. But no, they're not me. They're not mine. But how interesting, Donnie, was that? Because Donnie said, and at first when he said to me, he goes, well, I don't know a whole lot about it. And I said, you know what? That is awesome. What a great place to start on that, because at first we were starting with the conspiracy, not conspiracy theory. I think that's best place to start right there. Conspiracy fact that there was a conspiracy to kill Lincoln. Why, who, how, and what got him there and what got them there is where we started. You know what I mean? So I will tell you right now, most of the people in here know that conspiracy theory was something started by a letter agency to throw everybody off of the path of the truth. Most of the time when you have something like the JFK or name a conspiracy, you're going to have a lot of false trails thrown in there. You're going to have all kinds of different conspiracies made up by certain agencies that throw it in there to throw you all off. So you have to really, really dig for the truth. Now, you can't read just one book. You can't watch one documentary. Right, Donnie? Am I right?
yeah,
You can't. You can't go by the narrative and just ride that narrative and start throwing stuff out, because where are you going to get, right? So, I'm not sure who your people are, but you're scaring me. So, I thought it would be extremely interesting. So I started Donnie off with the conspiracy, and I gave him a couple of things to look at that were up to date and very fresh, within the last 3 months. And then we started digging.
yeah.
And like I said, you have to go in multiple directions and see where things link up. If you've got a personal letter from someone and then there's another personal letter back, or, something, that someone, a conversation, and there's a little piece of fact in there that matches up, and that's a good place to go. And then you research that. You can't just say, okay, this person did this for this reason. And go off somebody else's, like I said, narrative. There are thousands and thousands of books, and I'm going to show you something here in a minute. It's going to knock you off your chair. On Lincoln, there are more, even on the conspiracy, on the people that were involved. Okay, we've got 100, what are we at, 157 years now, is it? I don't know. Anybody do the quick math on that? It depends on where your starting point is, but from, do you start from the beginning of his presidency, or do you start at the assassination, at what I would call the murder? So where is your starting point? We're right at about
157 years.
Thank you. I was going to say
from his death.
Thank you, sweetie. Yeah. So, that's a long time. Thanks, Blue. So that's a very long time. So you're talking a century and a half here. So the game of telephone, and if you don't know what I mean by that, you start out the chicken cross the road. And by the time it goes around 50 people, and then you had, many decades involved, there was a chicken, there was a cow, they took an elevator, they took a plane, all this different stuff. Pirates are involved, whatever it may be, it changes, and people add and detract as they deem fit. And here's another thing that we were talking about that we found out with Amityville, Donnie. People are going to say what they want, and people are also going to focus on one thing, and because it's the one thing that absolutely colors everything that comes after. Do you see what I'm saying? So, they heard that the window didn't break, so everything must be false. Now, we found out in Amityville, again, after all that time, what did we put, like 23 hours worth of content out on that? It's close. I mean, 4 nights, and they were 3 hours apiece. I don't know, do the math. But, quite a bit. And I was shocked at where I was at the end. We all weren't far off. Some said, hoax, mix, and all this other stuff. But by digging, with Donnie going in his direction where it led him, and me going in my direction where it led me, and coming back and putting it all together, I think we came up with a much different ending than we all expected, and learned some things along the way. And maybe we learned that we had heard a little piece of truth, but then it was wrapped in a lot of lie and conjecture and, just made up fibs. Okay, so you got to imagine going back, that far, 157 years, to such a character. I hear all the time, very historic. I don't even think that's possible. It doesn't make sense. But I want to say a historical icon, whether you liked him or you didn't. We are going to start with the conspiracy, and then we're going to move our way out. And for anybody who tells you that there was not a conspiracy to murder the 16th president of the United States, ask them why those 4 people hung in the, by the necks till they were dead at the fort, and why others went to life in prison. Some of them got pardoned. One of them got pardoned but didn't make it to the pardon. So yeah, Lizzie, we learned a lot. I learned a lot. Donnie learned a lot. This is not going to be any different. I have found stuff over the past few weeks, and it's just absolutely shocked me. Now, I have to be honest, going into this, I absolutely love the man. I have studied him. I have taught him in homeschooling. His quotes and his thoughts and his heart and even his melancholy, to look at him when he went in and look at his face after the fact, it looked like he aged 20 years. the burden of a nation, that he carried. So I don't know where you guys are or how much you know about Lincoln, but anybody, if you would like to put now one thing that you think of when you think of Lincoln, whether it be a word or a sentence, I would love to know. Wouldn't that be interesting, Donnie, to start out like we did with Amityville, and then at the very end, because there's going to be more than one episode here. This is going to be probably 3. Hi, Pete. How you doing, sweetie? Good to see you, darling. AJK, welcome in. Amy, everybody. I love you all so much. We do this for you. And this experience, to learn it together, to talk about it. So if you could do, if there was one thing or maybe 2 or 3 that you think about when you hear of Abraham Lincoln, what would that be? I don't care if it's the penny. Emancipation Proclamation, excellent. Oh, Jamie, I'm glad you're excited. I can't even contain my excitement. I'm trying to... but it's going to be amazing. I promise you. The stuff just in tonight's, and then we just so much stuff, man. Sacrifice. What a great word. Tormented, compassion, be kind. Love it. Love it. Love it. Call out whatever you see, Donnie. Please do. Assassination. Okay. That's absolutely sacrifice.
Zombie hunter.
Zombie.
It's supposed to be vampire hunter.
Not
zombie
true.
Hunter.
Absolutely debunk that. I hate that word debunk, but it's not true. I'm going to tell you what killed his mother, and I promise you it wasn't a vampire. But isn't that funny? A lot of younger people just see that, and that's what it's going to be. The 35 plus 2, stoic. Lincoln was the right place, right time, right president for the time. Wow, AJ, so true. So true. Almost like it was destined, like it was meant to be,
Yeah.
as in several, tolerance and sense of humor. Absolutely. Oh, don't doubt it. It's going to be amazing. I'm just so excited. Let's see. So that's a lot. That's a lot of different tolerance and sense of humor. I love that, Glenn. Yes. And, in a lot of ways, and we will kick into that. People didn't quite get that, I don't want to get off kilter here, but I will mention this. Loved Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer. I've never seen it, Glenn. I can't really, comment on it. I mean, I saw it and I'm like, I'm not. My son's trying to get me. I'm not watching that because I love him so much. You know what I mean? Loving father and husband. Truly chasing the truth. He really, really, really was. Very. Ghost photos, yes. This story has everything. As I said, if you see one that I missed, Donnie, please call it out.
Uncommon Belief said Abraham Lincoln didn't need law school. He taught himself.
Absolutely. So good. Yeah, so good. Abraham Lincoln, I don't know if this will startle you guys or not, but I'm going to bounce out a couple. And if I say it, I believe this to be fact, it's because I've researched it in probably 40 or 50 different directions, and Donnie can confirm on that that's what I've been doing. And I'm like, Donnie, I'm not going to throw everything at you that I've been going through. Here's a couple little things. You go your route, I'll go mine, and then we'll meet in the middle and we'll see what we come up with. So he had what would be a total accumulation of 1 year of education, of formal education. 1 year. And I can tell you, the fight for that education, I personally believe, and I'll take you down a detailed road of that, made him the man he was and gave him the convictions that he had. Yeah. I didn't see it, but read the book. Oh, the Vampire Slayer one. Yeah. And Edna, welcome in if she's here. Is she here? There she is.
Yeah, there she is.
Yeah. And Edna, if you missed it, I was wondering what you thought, if you could think of one thing or whatever, however you want to describe, when you think of Abraham Lincoln, what do you think of? If you could pop that up. Oh, Jamie read the book too. I'm guessing it was good. People said it was good, But again, it's hard for me to.
I could tell you what I thought of
fiction.
Before doing all the research and what I think of him after. Mm-hmm. Before I got into doing all this research about Lincoln and 19th century America, If you told me the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of Abe Lincoln, my response would be $5 bill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is
And a
essentially what I
penny.
would say. Yeah.
The penny. Mm-hmm.
Um, After doing all this
And the fight to
research,
keep the penny.
yeah, and
You know.
after doing all this research, my thoughts are, man, they don't make guys like that anymore these days, do they?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
They don't
And
make guys like him.
I almost light up when I wonder if sometimes when we come across figures like this that we feel so close to, that we kind of just really get into the heart of and the mind. You wonder if you were there, back in time or whatever. And then this is, I think of him as an honest, decent man who had the pain of the world on his shoulders. Beautifully put. Absolutely. And all these things said, everything everybody is saying here, except for the fact that he was a vampire slayer and a vampire killed his mom and he was forever afterward a vampire slayer.
That would be kind of cool.
Not true, but totally not true. Just saying, not even a little bit. And everything everybody is saying here, no matter how far away from each other they may be, they're all true. And we're talking about one man who lived 157 years ago. And I believe, as we said, there's everything in this. If you looked at the I couldn't fit it all. There's murder, war, scoundrels, liars, conspirators,
Paranormal stuff too.
love, devotion, paranormal, supernatural, spiritualism as a whole, and then the supernatural and the paranormal. You've got ghost trains, you've got White House ghosts, you've got foreign dignitaries as well as our own who have seen him. In poignant times of their life when they're trying to make decisions, he has come to them to either to give them support or, we don't know. It's up to the individual who had that experience to decide. But each one of them said they got a sense of backup, kind of. It's like you're doing the right thing. You see, power on, and such as Churchill and Eleanor Roosevelt and different people that have seen him. So we're going to take that through too. We're going to finish all with that. We're going to bring up the different things. We have premonitions that he had. I believe he was real. I think he had a little ability himself. Maybe that was also why it could have caused some of that desperation and that severe depression and melancholia we keep hearing about, because if he was absorbing the emotions of the world at that time as an empath, I'm not saying he was, I'm saying this is a thought, I have no proof to confirm that, but if he was absorbing the times, what a time to be an empath. With the struggle and strife, brother against brother, the entire Civil War, this man from day one, pretty much to the last day, the whole time, his nation, which he loved so dearly, both sides. That was the special part about him, both sides. Was in war and devastation, and he tried everything to keep it from happening. And we're going to look into that, and that's a special guy. And he had 4 days to sit in peace and to relax and celebrate before he was taken out by an assassin's bullet. And that part makes me insane.
And don't worry, Ian and myself, we'll be talking about all that.
Okay. Did I miss it? He attacked free speech, suspended habeas corpus, enabled his wife's abusive behavior. We're going to get there, Ian.
Yeah, we'll
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a reason for the habeas corpus, and there's a reason for the wife too.
Yeah.
Attacked free speech, I'm going to have to look into that, but
yeah.
I would say attacked is probably a rough word, but I don't want to jump ahead on that. I think I know what you're talking about. And basically, if I go in through, let me show you something, Ian. What I studied, I don't know if you can see this. Can you see this book? You can't probably read it, but you get the idea.
I can't read it.
Can you see how thick that book is? This is I'm going to tell you, without the, index and all that stuff, this is well over 840, 50 pages, okay, without the index and the foreword by Carl Sandburg, by the way, who knew Lincoln probably better than anybody. And that's from Hal Holbrook, who played Lincoln several times. This is his letters. These are his speeches and his words. And that's kind of the best way to see what he really meant. Not what somebody said he said, but to read his words. And if I could find something that I was looking at after I read his words, and I could find some documentaries that helped explain it by scholars and historians, which I am not. I'm neither. Okay, I didn't go to Harvard, I didn't go to Yale, I didn't go to Princeton or Oxford. Okay, none of that. But neither did Lincoln. You see? So I can't sit here and say this person's wrong or that person's wrong or whatever. All I can do is take common sense and dig and try to, see what the truth is. Not go in, like I said, and try to, make it fit the narrative. We don't do that, do we, Donnie? I mean, there's times where Donnie will say something, I'm like, yeah, say it, because we have to look into that. So that's the main thing, and the book is named Abraham Lincoln, His Speeches and Writings. And it has a preface by Carl Sandburg, and if you've ever read Sandburg's Lincoln, it's quite the thing. And it's the man wrote an awful lot. I mean, a lot of people did back then. So we have that reference to go for. Does that make sense? He had a great grandfather die at Andersonville. He also had a great his grandfather. If I get this wrong, I didn't write that down, but I'm going off the top of my head. So if I get a date or something else wrong, please correct me. But he, Traveler, Aunt Edna Traveler. Traveler was Lee's horse. I missed who started that, but that was Lee's horse.
And Edna said that her great great grandfather bred the horse that General Lee rode.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow, how cool! He loved Traveler, and I think he had one named Lucy too, didn't he? I digress. I could be wrong. I haven't been studying Lee this week. Who knows? We just might do that in the future. But we found this so interesting, and it's not just because he was the 16th president. It's not because he had a humble upbringing. Let's just put it that way. It wasn't because he was the president during the Civil War, and everything else. But we thought, since we're going to Gettysburg, this would be great. Donnie had said he didn't know a whole lot about the Civil War, right, Donnie?
I didn't know much at all. All I knew prior to this was that a bunch of Americans died, and then the only battle I knew about was Gettysburg. I didn't know about any of the other battles or anything like that.
So we thought it would be great, to go through this. I'm kind of enjoying Donnie's journey as well, and through this whole thing. And then in a couple weeks we'll be in Gettysburg, where the Gettysburg Address was given so wonderfully, and we'll touch on all of that. And then I thought I would go around and ask people there what they thought about Lincoln and what they remember and what they think, and then we're going to bring all that back to you. And we're working on a couple of different things, so I thought that would be really neat. But tonight we're going to start kind of funny. Now, Donnie, did you want to say anything before we have a video for you? We're going to stop it and talk a little bit, but we're not going to get very deep into detail. But this is, it's called They Shot Lincoln. It first aired in 1971. It is done in the format of As You Were There. Does that make sense to y'all? It's, they don't have a reporter, but you can it's kind of similar to that. And they have actors playing the different people, and they're speaking from the journals, the letters, and everything that happened at that time. Okay? And I thought it would be very interesting to start there, and then we're going to go back to the beginning. So you can understand, hello Cassie, love you baby. So you can understand a little bit about the man, and then we're going to move through it, and then come out on the other side and see where we're at. Does that make sense? Go ahead, Donnie. What would you like to say?
Well, I was just wondering if you wanted to tell that story that we talked about now or maybe after.
What is it, sweetie?
Remember that
Yes, I
story
got
that you
permission
told
to
me?
tell the story.
All
So
right.
we're going to be talking about a couple
So
things.
this story explains why this subject means so much to Sys-Cho and why she takes this so to heart. So I thought it was a good story to share.
Thank you, Donnie. And I got permission to share it because it is kind of a private one for my sons. But I don't know where I started admiring people that fight for the rights of people who cannot. You know, I have always been against any kind of humans hurting other humans for no reason. I am a full believer in defending yourself, defending others who cannot. The fight, come on, I was a soldier. You know what I mean? And I have, I took my oath very seriously, very seriously. And, right, Blue, but it did have a little bit. And we're gonna show you that, and you can decide.
Don't worry, we'll
Because
unpack
again,
that. We'll unpack that.
yeah, there's so much in this trunk, and we're unpacking it, and then we put it all in little spots, and then we're gonna go through the piles together. But again, I will say, and as I said on this show before, just about every culture you can imagine has had some form of power over the poor, or, people coming in and, Vikings taking over a whole town, Romans, I mean, you name it, every culture, even Native American tribes against Native American tribes. Everybody thinks, all Native Americans were cool and feathers and really cool, really neat little,
Some of them were downright
spiritual.
mean.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we can't really do that, which is why I always loved I Have a Dream speech, where one day I have a dream. Now, say what you want about MLK, Martin Luther King, but the words, I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will be, now I'm paraphrasing here, I just went blank, but judged by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin. Okay? And it goes deeper than that. If you read Michael and Jeff Shera's series on the Civil War, Killer Angels, which covers Gettysburg, Gods and Generals, which covers the beginning of the Civil War, and the last book, Last Full Measure of Devotion, covering the end of the war up to Appomattox and a little bit after. Well, the Last Full Measure of Devotion comes from the Gettysburg speech. Better Angels comes from a Lincoln letter and speech. So, again, anybody who fights for another's freedom, when it would have been so much easier to not, but still they powered on, gets my attention. Gets my attention. And there's so many misunderstandings about that, and we will get into it. But again, I'm not going to dig so deep into it that we drudge up so much of the pain. I don't think you guys need to be told about how much pain and sorrow there was, not just by those being held in slavery, but by those who fought on both sides. There's a quote in the movie Gettysburg, which again was based on the book Killer Angels by Michael Shera. And they were asking, a Union soldier was asking some Confederate prisoners, why are you fighting? Why are you guys doing this? And one of the gentlemen said, I don't know anything about slavery. I don't know nothing about that. He goes, we don't have any. I'm fighting for my rights. And he actually sounded like he said rats, but he said rights. He's fighting for his rights. They were all fighting for their rights, for their right to freedom, for their pursuit of happiness. You see? Both sides. So it can be still ugly at this time, but I can tell you, I lived in the South and I lived in the North pretty much the same amount of time. I don't, I have the position where I don't think any person should own another person and hold them against their will, period. And I taught that to my sons. So I also taught my sons to speak out when you hear lies, to stand up for what you believe in, and do it respectfully, but do not be silenced. Okay? There are ways to do things. And I think it was hard then, and I believe it's even harder now. Okay? That being said, my sons were in the 5th and 3rd grade at this time, and I had one. You're welcome, sweetheart. Thank you for listening. So one of my sons came home, and he was an all or nothing kind of guy. So if he got, say there was, one wrong on a test, he would be mad because he got one wrong. He never looked at, I got 9 right and 1 wrong. He was always, I got 1 wrong. So he always kind of came in and crumbled up and get angry about it. And I'd try to talk to him about it. Hold on, let's see what happened. All that kind of stuff. So I'm looking at this paper, and it was a basic, simple, true or false on history. They were just beginning their history, the 3rd grade, so you can imagine what they were learning, right? And I look at it, and I said, well, wait a minute. I see the red mark, and I see the thing, and the teacher happened to mark this one wrong. And I read the question, and it said, and I remember it to this day, verbatim, for the most part, slaves were happy and treated well by their masters. Think about that a minute. Think about that a minute. A young man in the 3rd grade marked that false. And I called him back in, and I looked at it, and I said, well, honey, she made a mistake. You got that right. Of course it's false. There's the word slave and master in it. Right out of the gate. And I said, can you tell me why you marked that wrong? Why you marked that false? And he said, yeah, Mom. Because they weren't free. How could you be treated well if they weren't free and allowed to live their dreams? He said to be torn from their families and never know where their children were, or their mother was, or their dad, or their brother. To be forced in labor and never get the reward of that labor. To not be free. Well, you can better bet that me and that young man went down to that school. I don't even remember driving. I was so mad. And I went in to catch the teacher because they usually stayed a little bit. And I went in the door and I sat down and I said, I have a question. Am I going to say her name? I said, I think you got this wrong. And he's upset because he could have got 100 on it. And I think you were probably just grading too fast or something. I'm sure this is a mistake. And she looked at it. She goes, no, that's correct. I said, excuse me? This is a teacher teaching my child. I said, excuse me? I said, could you repeat that, please? She said, look, I can see you're upset and you don't agree with this. I said, of course I don't agree with it. She says, we have to teach the curriculum that is set forth by the Board of Education. I said, is this your stand? She says, yes. I said, are you going to change a paper? She said, I can't. I said, I'm done. We're going to the principal. I go to the principal, I go to the office, the principal's still there. I said, I need to see her, and I couldn't even sit down. I'm tapping my foot, and I'm trying to maintain. And I walk in there, and I have to admit, it was a new school year. I didn't know the principal, and I didn't expect to see. I didn't think about it. And I walked in. And the beautiful young lady sitting behind that desk that was the principal of that school happened to be black. And I sat down and I said, I have a little problem. And I said, I understand, and I'm trying to maintain, the Board of Education picks the curriculum. I understand that the teachers have to teach the curriculum the way it's stated in the books, the way it was told. I don't agree with this. And I said, more powerful than that, he doesn't agree with it. And she looked at him, she looked at me, and she looked at the paper. I said, please tell me why this school is teaching this. And she read it. And she said, this is the curriculum that we teach. I said, do you agree with this? She says, I can't agree or disagree. I said, do you agree with teaching this in the school? You are teaching these children lies. She said, we have to teach the curriculum that the Board of Education puts forth on. Get your book bag, you're being homeschooled. No more lies. No more lies. Plain and simple. And the first thing we learned in history, in homeschool, was this man. His struggles, the people's struggles around him, and everything that was going on in the times. And we straightened that right out. And when I got home, I crossed it out. He got 100 and went on the refrigerator. So why does he mean so much to me? Why does this subject mean so much to me? It means something to me because our children, your grandchildren, their children need to understand the truth. We must remember history or we are destined to repeat it. And if you don't think that slavery is going on right now, please look into Tibet and the Falun Gong and the Uyghurs. And what did you say to me, Donnie? There's more slavery going on right now than when?
Well, I said that the Roman Empire, their economy was pretty much driven by slavery. That's to the Roman slavery was to the Romans what oil is to the modern Americans. Like that was the principal driving force behind
Human trafficking.
a lot of their economic growth and power. And right now, today, there are more slaves on Earth now than there were in Rome, and their whole economy was based on it.
And here he is to tell you, this is a little boy. And he said the principal didn't agree with it, and she was ashamed. She sat behind that chair, and she allowed it to happen. So if the principal of the school doesn't have, and the Board of Education didn't listen, and the parents didn't know, or they didn't care, they didn't look, then it's up to us to teach them the truth. And if we're obscure on what happened, we can't. If we don't know the truth, we can't teach it. But by gosh, we know that, I'm going to tell you as Lincoln said it. He said, alls I know is anybody that I ever spoke to that was for slavery never wanted to be one. That's one. 2, I know it must be bad because nobody feels good about it unless they are profiting from it. Both sides profit, for make no mistake. You can go all the way back to Philadelphia, 1776, the Constitution Hall, when they were arguing about the Declaration of Independence. 2 paragraphs were struck out immediately in Thomas Jefferson's words because they could not stop slavery then. They felt because the Declaration of Independence, first independence, then freedom for all men. Well, how many years did that take? 100? Almost. Right?
About 100.
One man stood up and fought his entire cabinet. He fought his wife. He fought his, pretty much his whole life. And I wanted you to see that. I wanted you to see that, and then you can decide. Because he knew, first, He had to preserve the Union. And then, slowly but surely, thank God, he did. Now ask yourself, 157 years later, why we're still arguing about this mess? Why people aren't judged by the content of their character? Why their better angels, their divine spark, doesn't reach out and judge a person one at a time. I will not be what my father was. I will be my own man, my own woman, and my pursuit of happiness. You're not promised happiness. You're promised the pursuit of it. These are things we need to hold on to. Abraham Lincoln has been my anchor for that my whole life. And I hope when we're done with this, you'll get a little bit out of it, and you'll still get the paranormal and the supernatural. It's got everything, doesn't it, Donnie?
Yeah, sorry, my dog's going crazy. He's trying
It's
to
okay.
hold my leg and everything. So
Oh my
I'm trying to
gosh.
get him off me.
Are you wearing a new cologne or something, or?
No, he knows when I'm doing this, because I usually never sit here in front of this screen for so long. So he's like, "Oh, Donnie needs to be distracted right now." Sorry about that.
Go ahead. Do you need to get him something? Go ahead.
No,
So
he
we
just
thought.
wants love.
So without further ado, Donnie, did you have anything to say about that? I'm going to shut up because
Well,
I'm going to run my makeup. Go ahead.
Oh no, I did have a story prepared, but I think I want to save that for after the video, actually, if that's okay.
Okay,
While we
sure. Is
talk.
it the one I'm thinking about? With
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. That's best for after.
Yeah,
But
I
we
wanna do
will
that.
talk through this, and we will explore this together. And like I said, if you get one thing out of this that you can take to heart, or one thing out of this that you didn't know, and one thing that you can tell a child, and it gives you some words, and it gives you some strength, and it gives you some insight, then it's not going to be wasted time. And hopefully we'll have some laughs and some surprises along the way. I'm going to try to keep it where it's not, there's a lot of dismal things going on, but that's not what we're going for. We realize how horrible these times were, and we Gettysburg and stuff like that. It's not, war's not pretty, but I think you're going to get some surprises out of this, and I think maybe a little strength too. And that's my hope for you guys. Okay? So without further ado, Donnie, are you ready for me to run this? And again, you can talk through, but this is about 50 minutes. We are actually watching a documentary together, but I think you're really going to dig it. I mean, the people who did this are absolutely amazing. And, I'm not going to say, because I'm playing this documentary, that I agree with every single solitary word, because I've done some digging on some of it, but this is pretty darn accurate. And then we'll talk all about it, because we've even got the John Wilkes Booth, where, did he escape? Was it really him? We got the mummy and the the mummified, could have been Booth. We're not going to, hit it now, but we've got all of that with, oh gosh, 3 or 4 different ones of those. It's everything. It's got everything. So without further ado,
I'm gonna go smoke real quick, if that's okay.
honey, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
I'm gonna play this. If I hit the wrong one here, let me see. Forgive me, because I forgot to write down the order. It's been a crazy day. Serve it up. Lori Cole says, here we go. I think just, if not, I'll take it down. Okay, wait, that's the wrong one. I think. Wait, maybe not. Hold on. Let me be sure. That's the right one. Yep.
Although simple in background,
Nope,
learning and attainment.
No. Sorry, guys. Okay, this is it. Take 2.
April 14th, 1865. The President of the United States attends a performance at Ford's Theater in Washington.
Just to be sure, can you all hear that okay? Because I had the volume really loud, and I can't tell with mine. Can you guys hear it and see it okay? It's supposed to be sepia, and, it's going to get better. It's supposed to look like an old movie. No, not Leonard Nimoy. Everybody, 5-5 sounds good. Okay, thanks, Ted. Here we go.
pulse is faint. The decision is made to move the president to the nearest bed. He cannot survive the journey to the White House.
Soldiers! 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 Let's go! The president! The president! Out of the way! Out of the way here! Out of the way! Out of the way! Out of the way! Out! There's room here! Back away! Back away! Move back! Keep on the way! Stay away! Back! Move back! Way through!
The president is carried across the street to the Peterson rooming house.
Back up!
The mob was insane. We had to push our way across the street. The soldiers carrying the president, and they didn't know where to take him. He was bleeding in the back of his head. Somebody shouted over here. The crowd was shouting to burn down the theater. They didn't know what to do. Someone said he was glad it happened. He was nearly killed. Only the police saved him from being hung to a lamppost. It's terrible. Terrible.
At the same time, Louis Payne has carried out his murderous attack on Seward.
Secretary Seward will live. The assailant stabbed him several times about the face and chest. Secretary's son, Frederick, is in more serious condition. He tried to stop the assassin from entering the house. He has multiple skull fractures. The nurse, another son, the secretary's daughter, a State Department messenger, all of them were beaten or stabbed by this madman.
Inside the shabby rooming house, as the family and friends of the dying president gather, there are fears for the whole government. For although George Atzelrod was too drunk to move against the vice president, Louis Payne's attack on Seward signals a wider conspiracy. It is Secretary of War Stanton who takes charge of the nation.
From this room, next door to where the president lies dying, Stanton mobilizes the city. He confiscates Ford's Theater, arresting all of its employees. He sets up roadblocks on every route leading out of Washington, save one, the one that Booth uses. Moments after the president is shot, the telegraph wires in and out of Washington fail for no apparent technical reason. And when they are restored, Secretary Stanton waits until morning before issuing arrest orders for John Wilkes Booth. He waits, in spite of the fact that hundreds of people saw Booth's leap to the stage, many of them so testifying that same night in this very room.
Booth, his leg broken in his leap to the stage, flees south toward Virginia with an accomplice, David Harold. In extreme pain, Booth must stop to have his leg set by Dr. Samuel Mudd. Throughout the night, Lincoln's life slowly ebbs away. There is nothing to do but wait.
President Lincoln died today, April 15th, at 7:22 a.m. He was 56 years old. At about 10:15 p.m. last night, a bullet struck the president behind the left ear, entering the brain and lodging behind the right eye. He was immediately rendered unconscious. He did not regain consciousness throughout the night. Mrs. Lincoln, Robert Lincoln, and members of his official family were with him at the end. Dr. Gurley led us in prayer. And then when it was over, Secretary Stanton said, "And now he belongs to the ages."
Now at last, Abe Lincoln goes home. A hush follows the black-draped funeral train across the land. Up from the Tidewater states where America took its first foothold on the future. Across the fallow fields of Pennsylvania and New York. Back to the wide Midlands where he was born. an outpouring of national grief unknown to the young republic, as millions of Americans pay homage to the gaunt, sad man from Springfield. 12 days after the murder, as the train approaches Buffalo, news comes that the assassin is trapped. Booth and Harold are trapped on the Garrett Farm in Port Royal, Virginia. There, a cavalry force of 25 soldiers, aided by Detective Lafayette C. Baker, corner the fugitives in a tobacco barn. Harold gives up quickly, but Booth refuses to surrender. The orders are to take Booth alive. To smoke him out, Lieutenant Doherty, the officer in command, orders the barn set afire. Booth is in despair. Expecting a hero's welcome in the South, he has received little help. In his diary this day, he has written that he is hunted like a dog, with every man's hand against me. Sergeant Boston Corbett claims to have fired the shot which mortally wounds Booth. Now the assassin will never be able to testify about the conspiracy. Booth is still conscious. Staring at his hands, he utters his last words. Useless. Useless. His wallet, pictures of 5 women, and a diary are taken from him. They are turned over to Secretary of War Stanton. And so Booth was silenced, killed by a soldier who claimed his orders came from God. Some say those orders came from Stanton. Yet there are those who say that Booth shot himself, and still others foolishly insist that the man shot in that burning barn was not Booth, and that the body was never positively identified before it was buried beneath the prison floor. 3 different versions of a single incident, yet one fact is clear. John Wilkes Booth, like Lee Harvey Oswald, was killed before he could tell his story. Booth's diary told part of his story, but his diary was suppressed by Secretary Stanton for 2 years. When it was released, 18 pages were missing. Because of this, some writers have accused Secretary Stanton of being behind the plot to kill President Lincoln. Others speculate Stanton suppressed the diary because in it Booth had written he had acted alone. Perhaps to Stanton, Mrs. Lincoln's irrational and anguished cry, "They have killed the president," underscored his sincere conviction that they, the Confederate leaders, had conspired with Booth to murder Abraham Lincoln. In swift retribution, the nation settles accounts with the known plotters. 4 go to prison. 4 are to hang. Louis Payne, George Atzerodt, David Harold, and Mrs. Surratt. The defendants have almost been bystanders at their own trial. They go to the gallows without being allowed to testify in their own defense. Temporarily, Stanton is able to use the trials and the nation's grief to support his policy of vengeance. Only later will the nation rediscover itself in the conscience of the dead president. In the terrible night at Ford's Theater, thousands of persons were swept into the drama. Upon some of them, time has made its judgments. Favoring Lincoln's moderate policies, Andrew Johnson dismissed Stanton. Congress then began impeachment proceedings against the new president. Johnson was acquitted by a single vote. Stanton never wrote his memoirs, never told the world what he knew about the plot to kill Lincoln. The Supreme Court appointment he always desired came to him on his deathbed. Seward would be ridiculed for Seward's folly, the purchase of Alaska for little over $7 million. Detective Lafayette Baker, possibly poisoned, died after allegedly writing a coded document accusing Stanton and 50 others of murdering Lincoln. Sergeant Boston Corbett, the man who claims to have shot and killed John Wilkes Booth, later was committed to an insane asylum. John F. Parker, who left the president unguarded that night, was never reprimanded. He returned to his job at the White House as a presidential guard. John Surratt, Booth's accomplice, escaped to become a Vatican guard in Rome. Extradited, tried, and released, he became a traveling lecturer on the assassination. Dr. Samuel Mudd, who set Booth's leg, was sentenced to life imprisonment. He was pardoned after saving the lives of hundreds of prisoners during a yellow fever epidemic. Major Rathbone and Miss Harris, the young couple attending the theater with the Lincolns that night, were married. Later, he was sent to an insane asylum for killing his wife. Mrs. Mary Todd Lincoln was certified mad in 1875 and sent to an asylum. Her son Robert signed the commitment papers. Robert Lincoln later became Secretary of War. He was present as an eyewitness at two other presidential assassinations, Garfield and McKinley.
Now, a century later, taking into consideration all that we know, some of us may see in the murder of Abraham Lincoln a conspiracy going far beyond the unhinged act of a single assassin. Just as some today see a conspiracy in the murder of President Kennedy. Others of us, on the other hand, may look upon the murder of Abraham Lincoln as the simple, pathetic act of a desperate man, seeking, in John Wilkes Booth's own words, to become not just a fine actor, but a name in history. The truth may never be known, but this much we do know. On April the 14th, 1865, Abraham Lincoln had a plan to guide a shattered country toward a future of peace and understanding among all of its people. John Wilkes Booth destroyed that plan, perhaps forever, by firing into Lincoln's brain a 1-ounce ball of lead. The heaviest bullet, all things considered, ever fired in American history.
History cannot be rewritten. A pathetic madman may have ended Lincoln's life, yet nothing could still Lincoln's voice of charity. Lincoln towers in our national heritage. The compassionate vision of America he voiced more than a century ago has forever inspired men to their loftiest ideals, even to this day. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness, let us have faith that right makes might, and in that faith, let us to the end. A house divided against itself cannot stand. As I would not be a slave, so I would not be a master. Let reverence for the laws become the political religion of the country, that the nation shall, under God, have a new birth of freedom, and the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Gosh, I feel like I should stand.
Man.
You go, Donnie.
Well, man, that was a good video, but they did leave out some details,
Oh
some
gosh, yeah.
important details. Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I
We're
was
just
like,
getting
wait a minute.
started.
Wait a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
just getting started,
Yeah.
guys.
We're just getting started.
Yeah,
This is
I've
the
been
warm up.
looking at all your stuff, and some of you absolutely are throwing out stuff that's true. Let me tell you something about the pillow. The
That
the
was an
guy who
appetizer,
owned
folks.
yeah, the guy who owned Peterson, the rooming house, also sent a bill to the White House for every sheet, every blanket, that pillow. Floors that need to be done because of the president's blood had ruined the sheets and everything else. Sent a list. I saw the bill. It's incredible. It just makes you wonder what goes through people's minds. As a businessman, but still tact, a little respect, But so he got paid for the pillow, and he displayed it, and probably got charged people to come and see it. So. There's that. There's so much in there, and Donnie and I are trying real hard because we're like chomping at the bit here to go, oh, this guy. Glenn, that was very interesting about the guy who shot Booth. Yeah, it seemed like a lot of people that were involved in this were, crazy. You got to think of the times, and so many of the soldiers that lived through different things. Some of them were crazy from the start, Some of the things off the top of my head that I think are worth mentioning is 12 people turned them down to go to that theater that night. Now, Grant, I have seen absolutely nothing that said anything about Grant knowing anything about this, or he basically wanted to go see his kids. He's been fighting since the beginning. He started in the western states and then came in at the end as a fighting general, and we will talk about that and all the different generals and stuff. But it was absolutely true that a lot of people could not stomach Mary at this time. I stated back before when we did a little bit on this, when we had the Docet Michelle here, that Mary was batshit crazy, and I had no idea how much and why. And I don't like to judge people like that, so I do some digging. I go back and I try to figure out. We all know that our childhood and the way we were raised and the people that were raised around us and our events on our journey forms us and makes our character along the way. So Donnie and I said, let's go back to the beginning, right, Don?
Yep.
Let's go back to the beginning on at least these two people to see what it was about, what was Lincoln about, who were his influences, what was he like as a young man growing up. And we're going to do it quickly. We're not going to, because that's a lot of time. But we're trying to give you the important stuff, and if we've pulled it out, it's because we've researched it, and I've called Donnie, and he's called me, and usually we're on the phone for hours, right, Donnie?
Yeah.
And we're running stuff back and forth, and Donnie will find something, and I'll go, okay, if you've got that, and you've got it from multiple sources, let's run with that. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to do that. That's kind of the way we do this. So we're not really trying to influence each other. We're more like trying to get an outline and how far back do we need to go. And Donnie says to me something I thought was absolutely adorable. I need you to look at this though first, and then I'll tell you what Donnie asked me. This is your basic conspirators here, okay? And we have not forgot about any of them. They're all here. They just talked about them. We'll go over them in detail in the next one.
And some others that they didn't mention.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, all the different little things, like, was that guy really the one that shot him? And, I agree, he's got a history. And Glenn, I didn't know he castrated himself, though. That's something they left out. But we haven't dug too deep on him, okay? So, but we will. But we have to do it in sections, if that makes sense, or everybody's just going to get lost. But I thought that was a magnificent documentary. It was first on television in 1971, and I love the way they did it. And it's probably that there's a similar documentaries out there about this, and this one seemed to hit all the points that I was able to dig and find out. So most of the stuff they were saying is right on point. There's just more of it. Do you agree with that, Donnie? There's more of it on each person.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of more understanding, like, why was Lewis Payne such a mad dog killer? That's your guy right up there at 12 o'clock. You know, what's the guy in the zombie? Oh, gosh, here comes the names, and I can't do it. And I can't put Kevin Bacon in everything. We'll just think Kevin Bacon did all this. So, but there's a guy, what's the big zombie show that just went through?
Walking Dead?
Thank you. And the main dude in that's kind of brutish, and you know he's the warrior guy. Well, they're all kind of
I know who you're talking about. The guy who's like Punisher.
Yeah, looks just like him. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I was shocked at some of these pictures, and I've seen quite a few pictures of him, and we will get those for you as much as we can. I apologize for the mistake in the thing, but it's been a very extremely busy week, and then a lot of research, and sometimes I miss those little notifications. Even though I shut off everything so it won't happen, some get through, and I apologize for that. Should have been a cleaner video, but I think you got the most of it, guys, right? And this is the one we chose because, like I said, all the research and everything else, it goes right along with this, and it showed it so well. So I hope you enjoyed that. We will put a link for it in the description. I'll go back tonight after this loads, and I will put that link in there. You can watch that for free on YouTube if you want to see it again. Okay? Yeah, that's absolutely true, Daryl. And I'm so glad to see you, Daryl. While you're here, I must tell you, everybody, send bacon and love to Daryl, because one of our first shows, Daryl started throwing bacon up. He said it meant love, or somebody said something about love. So our thing for this show is bacon. So toss that bacon up to Daryl. And I don't know if you knew that or not, but it's stuck and it's forever ours. And bacon is love, baby. You know, I mean, I understand if you're a vegan. If you don't eat meat, I understand. You don't have to eat the bacon. You just have to give it and bring enough for the class. So we love you, Daryl, for that. Thank you. You've been wonderful, and I'm so glad to see you tonight. Yeah, so there's that. And so Donnie asked me, because Donnie's such a wonderful reader and a deep researcher, he says, is there any books I should get? He says, you know, there's a lot of books on Lincoln. I sent him a picture. Do you remember this, Donnie?
Yeah.
Is there a lot of books on Lincoln? Yeah, Lincoln probably loved bacon. And isn't it funny? The personality, when you start digging in, you find out about, you know, this individual that you're studying. If you noticed in the video, they said that morning he dined on milk and fruit. His favorite food was fruit. You often see him sitting at a table with his size 14 boots on the table, you know, all made all fancy, leaning back and slicing off pieces of an apple. That was his biggest thing. So the biggest thing was fruit. They often told him, you need to remember to eat, Mr. Lincoln. He was so worried and pacing and thinking and writing and trying to fix everything that most of the time he forgot to eat. His last meal was cold meat and potatoes. That's what this man's last meal was. And I found that a little sad, you know. But there's that. But we've got plenty of bacon we can sling tonight, so everybody get some. This was in 2015. The tower, as far as I know, is still there. It's much larger now. And there were more than 15,000 books written about Lincoln. This is just Lincoln. This is not Booth, Conspiracy, Stanton, everybody involved, Seward, and all these. This is just Lincoln. 15,000 books written about him.
The only person in history about whom more books were written about was probably Jesus.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
It's a fact.
Yeah.
So now in 2022, there are more than 2,000 books. Now, if you know how publishers work, to get a book written on a subject, say of JFK or whatever, you have to have found something new, a new approach, some new piece of information that makes a publisher go, okay, we're going to publish this, because there's already 2,000 books. So over 157 years, people are still finding new things, new ways to put things in there, you know, his letters or the man or his early life or whatever. And this is amazing. And this is how large this tower is. Do you see that? It is over 35 feet tall, and it stands in the new Ford's Theater Memorial Library. And it stands to this day, from what I understand. I asked around, and that's pretty amazing. Goes up almost 4 flights. It's much higher now, though. Amazing, right? There you go. So we decided, Donnie and I. Donnie, did you want to say anything else about this? It's pretty amazing, if you ask me. This is just books. I mean, it's 8 feet around the base. It's crazy, right?
Yeah, that is, man.
I know. You think about it. So say what you want about Lincoln. If you came in and you're not really a Lincoln fan, or you thought some things about Lincoln before, or maybe you didn't know too much about him, I think by the time we're done with this, you know what I mean? You're going to think, at least you'll know more, and you can base your opinion on facts. Donnie and I are not wearing, I will say it again, we are not scholars, we don't have a degree in history, but we have a love for the truth. And I thought the subject was important enough to dig until we uncover as much of it as we can. So that's what we're going to do. Yes, I think they should put Christmas lights on it too. Uncommon belief. I'm not sure that they don't, but that'd be amazing. So back we go. And I wanted to tell you just a little bit of the facts, and we all know the story, but maybe some do not. Lincoln was born February 12th, 1809 in Hogginsville, Kentucky, and he was the second child of Thomas and Mary Lincoln. Now, I don't know what you guys have heard about Thomas Lincoln. It is very true that Lincoln did not go. He got word, and when he was in the I believe he's in the White House, that or on his way. I think maybe he hadn't got there yet. But anyway, I can look that up and get you facts on that. But the point was, he wrote back that he did not think it would be good for either one. Now, why did he not get along with his father? I'm going to bring more of that in the future, but I wanted to give you this. It is told that his dad was a drunk, and this and that and a whole bunch of other things. I don't believe that's true. Donnie and I were talking earlier about it. I've looked through, believe it or not, documents from the little general store once they got to Illinois. And he was quite the carpenter and fitter. And when he got there was more people around and more people to learn from. And he did a really good job. I've actually seen some of the cabinets and stuff he made. If I can get that for you, I will. But he was a dirt farmer. And I'm wrapping my head around, what was a dirt farmer? Somebody who planted stuff in the dirt, right? But he was a simple man. They say he was well liked. But
Are we talking about Thomas or Abraham?
Thomas,
okay.
The father.
Right.
He had some problems back then with land. Now, he had thought he purchased a beautiful plot of land. I think it was 11 acres. I could be off on that, but you get the idea. Called Sinking Spring Farm. It was a beautiful plot of land. But a lot of people were getting swindled back then, so you'd give money to one, and several people were given money, and then you go to get the deed, and guess what? You don't own it, and you just lost all your money. There was lots of that going on. When he picked up his family to move, it is stated in many books and several documentaries that I've seen that he stated that he was not staying in a slave state. He was highly against slavery. His mother was too, and most of the people that were around him felt the same way. Again, they're poor, right? They wouldn't have slaves and be able to afford.
So Thomas refused to stay in a slave state?
Yes, this is what's said in documentaries and in several books by scholars.
Yeah.
In tweed coats and bow ties. So who am I to say they're wrong? However, I am digging in other places and finding out that, yes, that was part of it. He did not like living in a slave state, and things were getting tight. Things were coming up. We had the whole Nebraska, was it Nebraska what's the other state? I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. But there were 2 new states coming in, and the big thing that started was, would they be free states or slave states? That's what kicked this whole thing off. That was right before the Lincoln-Douglas debates and everything else. That's what was really kicking it off and had everybody talking about it, because there was slave states that were established, and what they were trying to do and what Lincoln was talking on at that time was, we can't stop the slave states from having them. It's unconstitutional. It's their right. However, we can keep it from spreading. Keep that in your mind. Let's go back to Thomas. So Thomas took his family, because he got moved off of 2 pieces of property. And in Kentucky, in Illinois, they actually had surveyors with plots of land, and they were handling the deeds and the payment of that land in a much more structured manner. But he continued to fight to get his money back and get back Sinking Spring Farm for many years. He actually went to court. Many people did. The judge took the land, auctioned it off for $82 on the front porch of the courthouse, and said everybody was a liar, nobody wins. So he lost everything there. But they had already established a little homestead there in Illinois. Okay, so we're going to go back to that. Person I want to talk to you about now is this lovely lady right here. And this is Lincoln's mom. This is there's only 2 drawings of her. Of course, they didn't have cameras, in where they were now. But this is a drawing of her done. Now, it's very hard to go back and find out what her lineage was, because she was basically an orphan. She was brought very young to her uncle and her uncle's family, who raised her and another girl who was also an orphan, and they became like sisters. But she was quite an amazing lady, and I have a little video on that. Donnie, did you look up anything on her? Did you want to say anything
No,
about
I
her?
didn't really look into anything into his early life. I mostly looked into the war and then the assassination.
Perfect.
So this is all new to me.
Right. So this is another drawing of her with Lincoln. Of course, they didn't stand for this. They didn't hire artists to stand there, but a lot of it was done by people who knew them, that had, a little artistic talent, and later on by description. Now, it was way too important to leave up to me and my memory, so I went ahead and I did a little video from people that knew a little bit more than I. So I wanted to go ahead and play that. It's only about 3 minutes, so it tells you a little bit more. Why is this important? Because I found by digging on this something, and I called Donnie and told him about it. If you remember when we were doing Amityville, one of the things that really irked me and made me really dig into what George Lutz was saying was, he used to open up all his speeches with, the first day we were there, within the first hour, the dog tried to hang himself. And I'm like, hold on a minute. They're pushing a narrative here. I don't believe the dog tried to hang himself. He may have jumped over the fence to get away from something. He may have been trying to get to something and jumped the fence. And I don't think the dog sat there and go, I'm going to commit suicide right now and try to hang myself. It's the way you say things. One of the things that I've heard over the years was that she died of poisoned milk. I've also heard that she died of poisoning. Okay, which also may have, I don't know, I didn't read the book, guys who read the book, The Vampire Killer or whatever, I don't know what spawned that, but that could have been it. It's not really true. It's true, but it's not true. So let's see what really happened. And Ed, you're going to get a kick out of this, you too, Lindsay. He always laid on the floor reading, because he was so darn tall.
Although simple in background, learning, and attainments, she had a profound Christian faith and would become a caring and nurturing mother to her children. Abraham Lincoln's law partner, William H. Herndon, who interviewed individuals who remembered Nancy Hanks, including Abraham Lincoln, penned a description of her.
She was above the ordinary height and stature, weighed about 130 pounds, was slenderly built, and had much the appearance of one inclined to consumption or tuberculosis. Her skin was dark, hair brown, eyes gray and small, forehead prominent, face sharp and angular, with a marked expression of melancholy, which fixed itself in the memory of whoever saw or knew her. Though her life was seemingly beclouded by a spirit of sadness, she was, in disposition, amiable and generally cheerful. William H. Herndon.
God bless my mother. All that I am or ever hope to be, I owe to her. Abraham Lincoln. My earliest recollection, however, is of this Knob Creek place. Abraham Lincoln.
While entertaining a Dr. J.J. Wright of Emporia, Kansas, and others in the White House, President Lincoln remarked about his youth at Knob Creek.
I remember the old home very well. Our farm was composed of 3 fields which lay in a valley surrounded by high hills and deep gorges. Sometimes when there came a big rain in the hills, the water would come down the gorges and spread over the farm. The last thing I remember doing there was one Saturday afternoon, the other boys planted the corn in what we called the big field. It contained 7 acres, and I dropped the pumpkin seed. The next Sunday morning, there came a big rain in the hills. It did not rain a drop in the valley, but the water coming down through the gorges washed ground, corn, and pumpkin seeds all clear off the field. Abraham Lincoln.
After Thomas Lincoln returned to Indiana, tragedy struck again. On October 5, 1818, Nancy Hanks Lincoln died of, probably, brucellosis, a disease she contracted from the milk of infected cows that fed on snake root. She was only 35 years old. Abraham Lincoln was 9 years old. Death had struck the Lincoln family for the second time in 4 years. Nancy was buried in a family graveyard after Thomas Lincoln read scripture and led the family and a few neighbors in prayers. Nearby are the graves of Thomas and Elizabeth Hanks Sparrow, who also died of the same illness that year. Thomas Lincoln was hardly through with Kentucky, though. He returned often to visit his mother. He also began visiting an old friend in Elizabethtown, Sarah Bush Johnston, whose husband, Daniel Johnston, the Hardin County jailer, had died in 1816.
There's Thomas, and it's so funny because he's like pioneer, well-liked, and died of milk poisoning. That's all she gets, right? So that's it. And I wanted to show you this picture because they said that he was always laying on the floor, even in the house in Springfield, Illinois, that he shared with Mary. He was always laying on the floor. He was always playing with the boys, and he would get like 11 different newspapers because he always wanted to know what was going on. And this is when he and Mary just got together. So now we're back. We see what his mother's like. I can see him in her face. And there's something else about her that got my attention. The people in the town that wrote about her said that she was generally cheerful, just like the guy said. And she taught him to read the Bible. She was literate and could write. Thomas was not. He did not like an education. He said, it's not going to get you anywhere. You're going to be a dirt farmer just like me, Abraham. And everybody, very rarely do people call him Abe. He liked to be called Abraham. And he did not approve of it. So she taught him kind of, behind the scenes and away from Thomas. The melancholy and the Depression, I think that's where Lincoln got it from. You know, I mean, make that click, because he was the same. He was humorous. And what were we talking about with Steve not long ago? You know, look at Robin Williams. Look, a lot of your comedians and stuff, and people that try to be the class clown or you know, the life of the party, could very well be suffering from severe depression. Lincoln did. His law partner there that you heard of, William Herndon, always spoke very highly of him. Extremely intelligent. You know, of course, they were law partners. But he said that when Lincoln walked across the room, he dripped melancholia. This man had severe depression. He lost his mother at 9. Right before that, you heard just 4 years later. So when he was about 5 going on 6, he walked up the hill with his family to bury his baby brother who had died. We don't know what killed him, but he helped his father build a coffin. And then just 4 years later, young Lincoln at 9 actually whittled the nails, the pegs that held his mother's coffin together and helped his dad carry that and put it away. It broke his heart forever. Forever. He was awkward and lanky. He wore a size 14 shoe. He was low-waisted and high-legged. He was 6 foot 3 and 3/4. Most people say 6'4", but it wasn't. 6'3". You have to read Sandburg's Lincoln. I think Carl Sandburg knew more about Lincoln than Lincoln knew. But
which
one
was
of
gigantic back then.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. And then that tall hat on top of it,
Yeah.
which he would always keep his papers in. You know, if he was giving a speech, he'd be in his hat. You know, and that's something that Mary always used to say. Tell him to look at his hat. He always keeps everything in his hat. So when you go back and you look at that, and now you hear that she died of poisoning, you know it was something that happened back then. You know, the cows eat the snake weed, and then it doesn't poison them, it poisons the milk. And she actually went, I think it was almost like 2 miles away, to relatives. I can't remember whether it was her cousin or whatever, but you know, they were related. The middle name was Hanks, and heard that they had come down with a sickness, and she went to nurse them and help them through. And while she was staying with them, she drank the milk that they had, and the milk had made them ill, and she died not long after. And Lincoln was never the same. Donnie, did you have anything on that or questions? But that was the link, man. When I heard that they were describing her with that depression in her eyes, that she was strong in stature. And again, like I said, she could read and write. And that was one thing that Thomas was very upset. Think about the times. Of course, he would be insulted by that and try to get his son to follow his footsteps. And Lincoln wanted none of it, because his mother just told him that this could be, you know, your ticket out. And the only other thing, Lincoln didn't speak much about his mother, because when he did, he would put his head down and he would just remember. And there's so many letters and thoughts in this book and poems that he wrote about how when he'd remember those that he loved that had passed, it was almost like he could go in his mind and walk with the ghosts of their memory. Like he would almost go away and go to them. And it was just really beautiful the way he wrote it. But here's another thing that he said. I remember my mother's prayers, and they have always followed me. They have clung to me all my life. This was a man who appreciated those who gave him time, their wisdom, their care, and their love. Right after she died, the father left and went back. You heard him say he went back, he visited his mother. And then this one woman, Sarah, who was the widow of the jailer of that county. And if you've heard about that county before, I'm not mistaken. Was it not the same one that, like Young Guns and all that with Billy the Kid and stuff? Is that the same? I don't know, but whoever knows could tell me. But something I thought of when I heard it. But I digress. So Thomas goes, and he's going back and forth. And when he went back and forth, he's not leaving these kids with anybody. Lincoln's 9. His sister Sarah, another Sarah, is 11. And she's taking care of Lincoln. Okay? So it's not just you get in a car and you go, and you come back, you're gone a while. This last time he was gone for almost 3 months. The only food that they had was some dried berries that their mother had put up before she died. And I don't know what else they did. But it's very sketchy, and there's a lot of blank spots there. But I will tell you this. Thomas married Sarah, and she was a good woman and a good mother, and she had 3 children of her own. And them in tow, he brings her back. And when the door flings open, it's Thomas first, Sarah behind him, and the children behind them. Lincoln ran past his father and clung to this woman he had never met in his life and would not let her go. He was so heartbroken and so starved for love and care. And she set forth in turning that upside down place into a home and something else. She could read and she could write. And she used to go find books for Lincoln. And instead of chores and everything else, he would do a lot of chores, but he would be given a break while she was cooking and cleaning, and he would read from these books to everybody in the room, which is a little log cabin, so all the children and her. And thus he learned. And she said about him that even though he had more of an education than she, and much wiser, that somehow they were on the same track. And she was the only one to live to see him go to the White House. And when he came back to visit her, and he did, after when he was president, he had time and everything else, he went back and she took him to the gravesite of his father that he had never been at. Remember, he didn't go to the funeral. He didn't see him before he died. And Hal Holbrook, who, if you haven't seen him play Lincoln, it's a darn good Lincoln. And he really dug, to the point of he wouldn't even put lifts on the outside of his shoes. He put them on the inside, so everything, it was about Lincoln, the way he laughed, the way he paused and thought about things. That again he got from his mother. She was said to be intellectual. And what did that mean back then? You have to imagine in the time, it was probably she thought about things before she spoke. She taught him to do the same thing. All of these things from these 2 women and his sister Sarah as well. And the things he learned he didn't want to be a part of from the dad and from other people in the town. He carried with him to the presidency. He carried with him in the turmoil of the Civil War and the upturned country that he loved so much. And he brought all of that. And his quietness and his thinking was sometimes thought by his cabinet and all the West Pointers and the people that went to, these officers that had so much college and everything and looked down their nose at him, took it as he was unintelligent. The wisest man in the room thinks before he speaks. And I think he got that also from his mother. His love for God and country and education he got from his mother. And that's why I went back to them. Sarah died in childbirth, his sister. And he was not there. He was over in Springfield, and that also broke his heart. So now he's got 3 that he's lost. He's lost his brother, his mom, and Sarah, his sister. when he was able to go to Springfield and get around a little bit more of town and more people, he was extremely awkward with women. He didn't like to talk to them. You know, he was very scared. He felt like he was just, he would be the first one to try to beat you to the punch and how do you say that, Donnie?
Self-deprecate.
Thank you. And he would do that first, you know, like he had a funny joke where a guy said, "Oh gosh, you're uglier than Lincoln. You should just kill yourself." And you know, he would laugh at that. He would just everything like that he would laugh off. He didn't care what people said about him. He knew the man he was, and he just pushed forward. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Lindsay.
Lindsay.
Oh gosh, that's wonderful. That was the whole intent, to bring this man to life, you know, for anybody around the world, because by gosh, in that speech, the last speech he gave, it was for all nations to be in peace. You know, that's what he wanted. You know, and thank you so much. That means so much to me. Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you for the super chat. So, you know, I think that was important to go back to that. But the woman, there was another woman, and I cannot remember her name. I've got it written down, and I'll bring it up, you know, later. But there was another one, and she was engaged. So he felt like he wasn't a threat. So as a friend, he would talk to her, and he learned how to he learned how to talk a little bit. And you know, she was pretty intellectual and could carry a conversation. Loved poetry. Abraham absolutely loved, just like everybody else, Shakespeare. Donnie, how many plays did he see at Ford's Theater in that last month? I mean,
I think they said like he saw like 6 or 7 in like 2-month period.
Right. It
Yeah,
was
he
his
was like-
escape.
Yeah, he
It was his
loved
escape.
Shakespeare. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely loves Shakespeare. And guess who was the lead in all those plays? It wasn't John Wilkes Booth. It was his brother Edwin.
Mm-hmm.
The connections back and forth here are crazy. But this young lady that he got to talk to and become good friends with, that full intention on marrying the other guy, they were just friends. When she was on her deathbed, she called Lincoln it was Lincoln she called. And he sat with her as she died. And I believe that was tuberculosis. I could be wrong. But when she died, that was it. I mean, it just broke him.
Wait, who? The stepmother?
No, it was another lady, and I have the name written down, but I have so many notes, I didn't put it in the right spot. But I'll come up with it. But the most important thing is to know that he was losing everybody around him. So basically, the reason I bring this up is because he knew in this war that many would die, and he had. I've heard other people say that it didn't not affect him, but he didn't care. And that is so far from the truth. It was like every death affected him. He made himself ride through when Richmond fell, all the dead, and took his hat off, and he felt all of it. He and Mary volunteered at the old soldiers' home. They would go and help the woman. He did care too much, be kind. You know, I mean, it was like so much. It's like politicians today that just shut off everything and, you know, and say that's a justifiable amount of casualties for this. You know, he had none of that. He was like begging it to stop. He begged the South, don't do this, don't do this. So, you know, that's why he made them do the first shot on Fort Sumter. And I don't know if you guys know what happened there. But basically, and I know I'm jumping around, but it all links together. Basically, when he made the statement that they would hold all Union forts, and his cabinet himself said, how are you going to do that? And he said, I don't know how we're going to do that, but we must show strength and take them one at a time. The first one that popped up was Fort Sumter. They were surrounded by the Confederate Army, and they were all in boats and on the sides and everything else. And these men could not get supplies. They were running out of food. So Lincoln brilliantly thought up, okay, we go with no guns, we go with no arms whatsoever, and we take supplies of food, water and drink to the fort. If you fire on, and this was in his speech that he gave, the letters that he put out, if you fire upon food for a fellow countryman, then the aggression will be yours. I pray not. Well, they did. And that's what started it. So when you hear firing on Fort Sumter, it's a little deeper than that. Does that make sense, Donnie?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What did you want to say about any of that?
Well, I mean, nothing right now. I'm kind of saving all my stuff for later.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, some of these are, I wanted to go back a second. I want to find the right one here. Yeah, the road to the White House. It was quite the trip, guys. I mean, you know, it was something else. When he got to Springfield, yes, he was a rail splitter. Now, the way they say that, what's a rail splitter? That's somebody who uses a wedge in a mall to start splitting rails to make fences and build, log cabins and things like that. And they really emphasized, you hear the old rail splitter. This was not him. This was anybody, when he started running in the first couple, he lost, for senator or representative or whatever. He was learning how to debate. He was learning how to speak in public. He felt like he was awkward, and he worked on that. And he just spoke plainly and truthfully. Very well-spoken orator, could shake the house. You've heard it, his words here tonight. But anything you hear like that, like Honest Old Abe, well, why was he called Honest Old Abe? I guess you all have heard the story about how he walked 11 miles just to return a couple of pennies, which is why he's on the penny. We've heard that all our lives. I couldn't find any fact on that, but I'm still digging. I'm very interested in that. The reason he was called Honest Abe to begin with is because he was hired when he got to Springfield. His family took off. So that's Thomas and Sarah, the rest of the Sarah, the wife, the mother-in-law. And they left Springfield and went on to that land that I was talking about. And Abe said, I'm staying here. In a lot of documentaries, he says he left the house and went to Springfield on his own. That's not true. When he got there, he went into the general store and he was, trying to find a place to stay. He went and asked the guy, the owner of the store, the clerk, how much for a room? A bed, some sheets, things like this. And it was high. It was like $17. And Abe said, okay, I don't have that. And he says, well, I'm looking for a little help. How about if you work for me and I'll give you room, it's like for room and board. And Lincoln was like, that's amazing. He had the clothes on his back and some saddlebags and a horse. That's what he had. And he went into the room, dropped the saddlebags and came out. And he goes, well, I'm all moved in. And they had a nice laugh. He approached everything with humor. And I think he did that to keep himself from sinking too low as well. So while he was a clerk in that store, he paid his debts. He paid his creditors, which a lot of people didn't back then. And that's where he got, well, you can loan Honest Abe money because he's going to pay you back. He made sure he paid them back before he ate or did anything else. It was the right thing to do. Again, he got that from his mother. So, rail splitter, Honest Old Abe, was used a lot by the people that were trying to, push him up in advertisements for, whatever he was running for. That's what they dug on. But it wasn't him. And he didn't even like being called Abe. He liked to be called Abraham. So there you go with that. That's how he got his start in Springfield. Then he did many things. And that's where he ran into that wrestling crew. Basically, it was a bunch of guys in the town that were ruffians. And they liked to wrestle for money. And Abe walked in, and, he's a tall, lanky guy, and he's been, using a hatchet all his life. At 9 years old, a hatchet was put in his hand, and he had to help his father clear that land and build their first home. I mean, he was working from a very young age. Hard labor. And so the biggest guy came and challenged him. They're cheating and everything else. Abe wouldn't give up. And when he turned that guy over and pinned those strong shoulders to the ground with his lanky size and the long legs and long arms and good reach, they got he got their respect. And so he also started getting, that from that Honest Abe thing from that, because he wouldn't cheat, even if if others around him were cheating him. He wouldn't do it. That's something else you need to know. Donnie, anything on that?
No, I mean, I would have liked to have seen like what it looked like, or what the rules were, or the style of
Oh,
wrestling.
you mean the wrestling?
Yeah.
There were no rules. The guys would yell, they'd get drunk and do whatever, and hey, come on, you could beat the biggest guy, and they'd wrestle, and that was their thing. It was like a gang.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? And they kind of ruled the town and were rough and unruly and stuff like that. But nothing bad. I mean, they were burning down houses and pillaging and all that kind of stuff. They're bored. And but the thing was that they were cheating. They were doing all this stuff, throwing sand in the face and all that, And I don't know if you guys ever know that he got in trouble once by calling this, and this guy's name isn't even worth remembering, but calling this one senator a liar, And he said, well, he's just basically a liar. He's not telling you the truth, and said some other things that he did not hold back from telling the truth, even if it cost him. And this guy got insulted, challenged him to a duel, Lincoln. And Lincoln, of course, had to accept it, but he thought about it. There's that thinking again. And he thought about it, and he said, okay, well, I can't back out. I have to do this. Even everybody was telling him, don't do this. Well, if you're challenged in those times, I don't know what the rules are anywhere else, but you get to pick the weapons. So Lincoln picked the sword. The guy accepted. And while they're all, in their fancy outfits and tall hats and everything else, because this guy was a senator, Lincoln, with his long reach, is practicing. And he was pretty good with the sword because, again, the axe and this other stuff, right? And he had real strong arms. So his reach was spectacular with the sword on top of it. He's like practicing, like a swashbuckler, and he reaches up and he slashes a branch off this willow tree and everything else. They're kind of watching. And then Lincoln said, well, you know what else I need? We need a line in the sand kind of thing. So he says, we need to get a timber and put it, and neither one of us can step over that board. Well, when Lincoln stood up to demonstrate, that man could reach pretty darn far. So far that the senator said, you know what, let's call this off. There's no need for this. We're two gentlemen. Yeah, he backed right out of that. That's a thinking man. That's using your wisdom. That's using your wit. And he continued to do so. So there's a little bit, we missed some of it, the different things that he went through and the awkward. There was a Mary Owens, once he got up there and he started to, to actually get this, the seat and to be a representative. Of course, there was the Whig Party at the time. They were working on a new party, which was the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. And he was our first Republican nominated. And he was the first Republican president, our 16th president. Yep. Somebody else ran with him, was nominated, and that was William Seward. He didn't think much of Seward at first. Seward absolutely hated him, even though they agreed on so many things about the slave state. Because remember, I was talking about the Nebraska Act. I can't remember the other state. I have it written down, but again, there goes my head.
Real quick, for people who are unfamiliar, William Seward was a guy who almost got assassinated by that Lewis Powell gentleman. Mm-hmm. He was the Secretary of State at the time.
Yes.
And yeah, that's...
Mm-hmm. And when, again, you've heard that Lincoln picked a lot of people for his cabinet that disagreed with him or whatever. He picked them for their wisdom, for their education, for the way they dealt with. He says, I need these people around me. Because Lincoln never went to military school. He never went to officers cadet school. He never went to West Point like these guys did. And he never fought in a war. So he needed this around him. He fixed that. You know how he fixed that? When they kept saying he didn't know anything about it, he went and got every book written on the subject, locked himself in his room, and read them all. And when he came out, he knew as much as they did. It was amazing. He at least knew the strategies, he knew the rules, he knew the ideas, so he could talk to them. Because again, they kept putting him down. His cabinet was horrid. I can't say enough about that. But Seward disliked him when they were running against each other and spoke against him. And all the way through, when he was picked, he almost didn't want to take it, but he yearned for the presidency so much and the public life to serve in as a politician. He wanted nothing else. So Seward accepted, right? So, yep, that's true, be kind. So Seward accepted Lincoln's position, and he took it, and he sat. And throughout the cabinet meetings and the ridicule and everything else, it wasn't long before Seward wrote his wife, again, in his own words, in his own writing, I read it, and it said, for all that I have thought of our President Lincoln, before, during, and now, I must tell you, my wife, he is the best of all of us. So Seward became a friend and an admirer. So that's saying something, you know. Now, Donnie, you had a little something, and you went back on one of our other characters here. Didn't you dig back into a little bit of young Mr. Booth there?
Oh, are we going there? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, during our research, I was looking. I didn't look too much into the early life of Abraham Lincoln. I actually looked more into the early life of John Wilkes Booth, and I was kind of, there's a lot of stuff, interesting stuff about him. First thing, like a lot of people said that
well said, Ted. I'm sorry.
He tried to gain notoriety and fame by killing Lincoln, and one of the things that people have to consider is John Wilkes Booth was already a household name. Like his picture was in people's houses.
Oh gosh.
He was considered the most handsome man in the country. He stood at 5'8". He had a pretty interesting life. But one of the stories that I found, to bring it back to the whole paranormal supernatural theme, because that is the show that we are doing. I did find this one interesting story. Now this comes from Asia Booth. If you remember her from the video we saw earlier, she is the older sister of John Wilkes Booth. Mm-hmm. She actually wrote in her memoir that when they were 13, when John Wilkes Booth was 13 years old and he was attending boarding school, I believe in Maryland. Yeah, it was in Cockeysville, Maryland. They came across a Romanian fortune teller who did a palm reading session for him. And Asia was there, the older sister, and she actually writes the palm reader's reading in her memoirs, which were later published. And this is what she wrote. I'm just going to read it off the screen right here. One day, a gypsy living in the woods near Cockeysville read John's palm. She said, you've a bad hand. The lines are all crisscross. It's full enough of sorrow, full of trouble. Trouble and plenty everywhere I look. Remember, John's 13 at this time.
Wow.
You'll break hearts. They'll be nothing to you. You'll die young and leave many to mourn you. Many to love you too. But you'll be rich, generous, and free with your money. You're born under an unlucky star. You've got in your hand a thundering crowd of enemies, not one friend. You'll make a bad end and have plenty to love you afterwards. You'll have a fast life, short, but a grand one. Now, young sir, I've never seen a worse hand, and I wish I hadn't seen it, but every word I've told you is true by the signs. You'd best turn a missionary or a priest and try to escape it. and this was written, reported by Asia, who was in attendance, and she wrote that in her memoir.
That's amazing, man. That's
Yeah, that
amazing.
Romanian fortune teller just took one look at his hand, and she was like, "Yikes!" You know?
Right?
Yeah.
Wow. And
And a
so
lot
right,
of
dead
it did
on.
come true. A lot of it
Yeah.
did come true
Yeah.
because, he did get rich, and he did kind of like flaunt his money and throw it around, and he was expecting a hero's welcome, but he was abandoned by, like, when he assassinated Lincoln, people in the South were angry at him. So he felt like he had been abandoned by both sides. That's what he wrote about in his diary, right?
Yes.
And the reason why people in the South turned on him, because they thought that by him assassinating Lincoln, the Union was going to blame the South and further, cause more mayhem and destruction and like ill intentions. Now, Lee had just surrendered. Um, People in the South were now like focusing on, okay, let's rebuild, let's move on. But then John Wilkes Booth assassinating Lincoln caused a lot of people in the South to mourn Lincoln because they thought he was their best chance of reconciliation and rebuilding. So that's why people in the South turned on him. And so once John Wilkes Booth realized that, he was like, he expected to be welcomed as a hero, but then he realized, oh, at the very end, the whole world's out to get me.
And he actually also wrote that, he was shocked by it,
Yeah, he was
And
shocked.
yeah, and he said that, everywhere I go, I'm treated like a dog. He didn't expect that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And as far as the diary goes, he did mention, and we will get more into this later. There is a man named Dan Thomas, and many others too. But Dan, I think, has done an awful lot of work on this. I haven't seen anybody do as much with as much detail, and I'm trying to get him on here for like one of our last episodes to go back over, like, so you can decide for yourself. Now, I can tell you this: when I look at the diary, and I have, not in my own hands, but via videos and documentaries. It's sad because Ford's Theater actually had that diary for a while after. I don't even, before it went into, we would take artifacts and put them in like the, Library of Congress, and people could still go in and look at it. You could go in and request to see it, and of course, go through everything. But at one point in time, it was pulled where nobody else could see it. But before it got there, they actually are pinholes in this diary where they had it up on a board at Ford's Theater displaying this thing, and behind glass, but it still had the pinholes in it. And I'm like, what? It just blew my mind. But if you look at the diary, and I will get you pictures of it, but just for now, it's one of those leather bound type things. I actually had the pencil in it. And as you open it up, it was made to be one of these things where once the year was over, you could take that out and get a new one and slip it in. So it had like a little pocket there. And then it had another little pocket for like stamps and some other things, or I can't remember what the other pocket was, but it actually said it on gold lettering on it. The thing about it is the first few pages that had like the phase of the moon and the kind of things like that, even back then they put this in there. The first few pages were missing. I can't remember how many. I think it was 8. And if you think about it logically, it was none of his writing on that, that they, assumed there was nothing big deal. It was like in the beginning, way before the attack and everything. But if you think about it, this was 11 days he was on the run. And in one of the houses he went to, they would not allow him in the house, but they allowed him to stay in the woodline, in the thicket, in the bushes and he was with Harold at the time. And we'll get more into all these people, but I just want to leave you with this to think about. Where's your bathroom? They wouldn't let him in the house. They wouldn't let him to the outhouse. They had to stay in the woods under hiding. So is it possible he ripped those out to use them as toilet paper? Think about it. A lot of people did that kind of stuff back then. Think. It's not those pages we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the ones that are missing from the guts of the whole thing when he starts
From
talking
like Edwin
about
Stanton.
Right.
Yeah.
Edwin Stanton was given that, as they said in the documentary there.
Yeah.
And when the man saw it, the pages were there. That 3 or 4 people that saw this, that read it. okay? And gave
Yeah.
it to Stanton. Stanton locks it in the safe and holds it. Won't let anybody see it until Congress asked for it. When they got it back, there was 18 pages missing.
Yeah.
I think it's the 10 after the first few that we need to think about. And Don Thomas has done a wonderful job of that and actually showed that when you write with the pencil on it, you know that thing where you're pushing down and you get the writing on underneath, and you can take the lead from the pencil and make it pop up and read it. We're going to get into all that good madness.
Lafayette Baker, who is considered by many historians to be the father of the Secret Service, was the one who turned over the diary over to Edwin Stanton. And remember, if you recall in the video, he was the one that eventually got poisoned. He was the only other person who actually read the whole diary.
Yes.
So he knew, he read those 18 pages. And when he gave it to Stanton and Stanton put it in his safe, and 2 years later, they found out that those 18 pages were missing. He was the only one who knew that, hey, when I gave it to you, those 18 pages were in there.
Yep.
And then the only other person who read those 18 pages was poisoned by his brother-in-law, who worked for Edwin Stanton.
Yep. Bing, bing, bing. Yep, like the 18 minutes missing out of the tapes from, 18 minutes of tape on the Nixon tapes. There's, stuff missing from Hoover talking to Johnson. I mean, there are so many parallels, and Donnie is going to bring back.
That's just one of the stories. That's just
oh
one.
my gosh,
Yeah,
it's just one. And Donnie's going to be bringing some extra fun at the end of this. To close everything out. Again, this could, we could be 90 by the time we get through this. But just say, but it's going to be so exciting because there's so much stuff that you haven't heard.
Yeah, there's so much weird stuff.
So much stuff.
One of the things I found
it was
about
arsenic,
the story,
by the way. It was arsenic poisoning on Baker. I believe it was put in the beer.
oh yeah, done over a prolonged period. He didn't get all the arsenic at once. His brother-in-law was putting a little bit at a time in his beer.
And extremely sick. You know how that
Yeah.
gets and builds up.
But
and everything.
one of the things I've noticed since I've been reading about this whole situation was that there are so many little like coincidences and happenstances that it almost feels fake. It's almost like if you had to write a fictitious story with this, and like if someone gave me that story, I would be like, that's not realistic. There's so many different coincidences.
Yeah.
It's almost like it was
so many
destined to happen.
parallels.
Yeah.
So many parallels with JFK. And Donnie has told me, and I have zero knowledge on this, so I'm excited to hear, not tonight, but down the line. We have it all structured out, guys. With tell him who.
Julius Caesar.
And don't you find it fun that in the Booth family, and again, we'll get deeper, I got pictures and stuff coming, but just for reference, the dad who you heard in the bar, that one drug that says, you'll never be the actor your father was, his name was Junius Brutus Booth.
Yeah.
I kid you not. And his brother Edwin was just fantastic. Both very respected actors. Said to be much more in-depth actor than John. But John was famous because John had his own pictures printed out and would hand them out like business cards. Everybody had one, including Mary Surratt and her daughter. He actually gave it to her daughter Anne. And she had it in her room on a mantle with others, and it was just big back then with the pictures. You heard that John Wilkes Booth was found with 5 pictures of women in his pocket. Don't you know that every single one of those women were just ripped through the coals, like, and interrogated like crazy. And, like every guy runs around with 5 pictures of women in his, in his wallet. But anyway, I digress. And some of those women, the women of Booth, oh gosh. But you'll also hear...
We'll go there. We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah.
You'll also hear, if you watch Robert Redford's basic movie, The Conspirator, which again is free on YouTube, and it's kind of long and boring, and it does take some literary license with Atkin and all that. There was kind of a little something there. But anyway, the rest of it's pretty true, and you get to see how that trial was held. It was a military tribunal. The defendants did not get to speak on their behalf. They did not get to protest anything. They had to sit there with their mouth shut. And when they finally brought Anne in to speak for her mother, all of the generals made a wall in front of Mary Surratt, so she couldn't even see her daughter after being locked up for so much time, and would not let Anne see her. It was horrible.
I got a pretty funny story about the trial, but I'm going to save that one for later.
Yeah, save that one for the trial. But I wanted to leave you guys with something kind of happy here, and I got to tell you about a couple of little things here too. I'm going to try to do it really fast because I know it's really late, but there's so much information. So this is Lincoln and this is Tad. What a lot of people don't realize is before he got to the White House, Mary, their firstborn, of course, was Robert. And then they had... William, which you always hear called Willie. Oh, gosh, get him. Ooh! Oh, goodness. Are we baking cupcakes tonight? Are you kidding me? Oh, that's awesome. Get him, guys. Who said that the last time about you can dodge a ball, but you can't dodge a wrench?
Well,
here we go,
at
guys.
least I know
there
where
you
I can go find a date, so that's good news.
Got to shut the cupcakes, yeah. I'm sure they're lovely ladies.
I'm gonna meet my soulmate. Thank you, Russian porn bot.
Yeah, Russian porn bot. There it is. That's just good stuff, man.
Yeah.
But you guys might not realize that they lost. Robert was, of course, their firstborn. They had another child named Eddie, and Eddie died of another sickness. There was so much death and so much disease, and the ever looming, you're going to drink poison milk, or you're going to get typhoid, or you're going to drink the water, such as Willie did. He drank the water in the White House. We talked about this before, about people coming over and drinking rum and everything else. The water was just poisonous. Here's hundreds of years later, after the infiltrators came over to this country, but
one thing I learned from studying, another thing I learned from studying all this is that 19th century America sucked. That was not a good century to be alive.
It was hard. It was hard.
It was like death and darkness and
I don't care what
stuff
culture
everywhere. Yeah.
I don't care what culture is, what your ancestors were when they came over on the boat, or they, whatever. It doesn't matter, whether you were Native American and you were here. If you don't respect your ancestors for living through this time and trudging on their journey to fight to get to the next, we would not be here if they didn't do this. So there you go. Thanks for reporting.
Maybe 100 years from now, they'll look back on today and think the same thing about us, though. Who knows?
It's possible. I just think there should be some respect there, because obviously the way we're looking at this man, where did he pick up everything? Where did so we kind of figure where the depression came from, where the intelligence came from, where the strength came from, and what he learned and observed, and what he pulled from books. He taught himself. Again, I say, he only had a year of education, formal education, which was, they didn't even have any requirements for teachers back then. Anybody could go in and start teaching. They basically taught reading, writing, and ciphering to 3. And that's how they said it, ciphering to 3. So basically math, so they could trade crops and not get ripped off and understand money. That was basically it. So we had a year of that. And I've actually seen his early writing, and I'll see if I can get some of that for you. It's amazing how, like those little things like Run, Fox, Run, or the Red Fox Ran Through. He's writing stuff like that, but everything had God in it. Everything had care and kind of a wholesome kind of thing to it. It's really very interesting. But here's where he got something else. And this is the part that I just get on, because I'm sorry, I'm totally against slavery. I hate I just hate everything about it. And we started with that. So I'm going to finish, then I'm going to do something fun, and then we're out. But where did Lincoln get his hatred for slavery, and how far back does it go? It goes way back. Here's how he started to get the idea. His father would bargain with other farmers or trade and, have debt. And not, again, I don't believe he was a drunk. I've seen the things he bought. He bought less whiskey than most of the people around there. And you got to think about whiskey was used for a
Everyone
lot of
bought
things.
whiskey all the
Right.
time back then. I mean,
Right,
that's
but
like
it's-
what you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's buying supplies and tools and Bibles and silk for his bride and, maybe cotton or
Yeah.
whatever they had back
And,
then.
and
you know,
whiskey
bowls of
actually had
cools.
like medicinal purposes
Right,
as well
right.
back then
A lot
too.
of that.
So
I didn't hear a lot about him being drunk. He was well liked in the town. He was part of the militia. His father, he joined in, to community things and stuff like that. So a lot of the things you hear about him, I don't think that Lincoln disliked him for that stuff. This is why he disliked him. The man hated education, didn't want Lincoln to have one. And that little bit of schooling he got, it wasn't one whole year. It was little pieces. And the reason it was little pieces is Lincoln would go to the schoolhouse. His father would forbid him to go the next day because he loaned him out as free labor to pay off his debts. And Lincoln would work all day, 9-10 hours a day with an axe or doing whatever it was that he had to do, and never saw the fruits of his labor, which is where he comes up with in so many of his speeches and letters and back and forth correspondence of it is absolutely wrong for a person to labor all day and not be able to partake in the bread. And of course he meant food and money and everything else. You cannot do that to a human being. And that's why he disliked his father. And while he was on loan to some of these different farms that he was basically indentured servitude there, he saw barges full of slaves chained together headed towards the slave auction. When he was in town, he would see the slave auction. He would see mothers holding their children and being ripped apart from their families. He said, nothing about this is good. These are people. These are people. These are human beings just like me. And they feel like me, and they cry like me, and they love like me, and they mourn like me. This is wrong. And his father would say the same thing and then do it to his own son. So there you go. And, we'll get into the whole thing about how he wanted to colonize it. It's not true. It's not true. I've read his words. And we'll explain all that.
yeah, he was writing all these things about slavery, like even before he ran
Yes.
for, he was very outspoken about it, very early on in his political career.
And
So,
keep in mind, a lot of people say, okay, the Civil War wasn't about... There was a lot of things involved in the Civil War. But before the Civil War, the whole
Yeah.
thing was about these two states that were trying to decide whether they were going to be slave states or free states. And they draw that line of demarcation, and I'll pull up maps and show you all that stuff. And that's where it all started. And then the debates, and of course people running for everything, and that's where it all comes up.
yeah.
But there's more to it. So where does Lincoln get some of his other stuff? Now, this is kind of fun. I thought this was kind of cool. So I'm thinking, gosh, this man has so much compassion. Where did he get this? He lost his mother. Of course, Sarah showed him compassion and love, and that saved the man. I think he would have just dried up if it hadn't been for his stepmother. She was amazing. And very well portrayed in Sandberg's Lincoln, which is, I think, a 6-part thing on YouTube. You can watch it. And Hal Holbrook does a wonderful Lincoln. It's absolutely worth watching. However, although I like the actress that played Mary Lincoln, I think she played Mary Lincoln a little bit too calm. Your better Mary portrayals are going to be in, believe it or not, the Lincoln movie with Daniel Day-Lewis as Sally Field as Mary, and Mary Tyler Moore also played her with Sam Waterston's Lincoln, and she had that dizzy kind of craziness about her, and Mary, although Lincoln came from a very humble beginning, in the cabin and all that stuff and working as he did, Mary was one of 16 kids. dearly loved her father, despised her mother. Well, her stepmother. I really don't know how she felt about her first mother. Her first mother died. And when her father remarried, he had a bunch and she had a bunch, and all these kids came in together. 16 kids in this house. Very well-to-do family. The neighbors will talk about it in letters that they wrote. And they said, arrogant, the Todds. Well, let's put it this way. God only needed one D in his name. The Todds had to have two. So that'll kind of tell you about that family. Her father was extremely into politics. She was fourth in line of his children. So she's right there smack dab in the middle. He paid no attention to his kids. He was just busy, busy, busy and all this stuff. So Mary started thinking, he's talking politics all the time. I'm going to learn politics. And she did. So she could get her father's attention at the dinner table, and he would begin to have conversations with her, and she says, because she was not a pretty lady, and she certainly was short in stature and a little, she had a little chunk going on. She was kind of a little round woman, and to her, I think she was, I'm going to get it off, but I think she was barely 5 foot, maybe 5'3", somewhere around in there. And here he is, and they would always say, well, there's the long and the short of it kind of thing when they're standing together and stuff like that, as a joke or whatever. But that's where she got to be able to learn politics. And although she wasn't the most beautiful thing in the room, men would stand around and talk to her, and because she could speak on these things. And that's when the two came together, two different worlds. Mary knew, and her household, even though they had hired freed slaves or people that were born free and as servants, they also, dead set against slavery, didn't like the whole institution of it or anything else. So she had that, but she knew more of it. Lincoln never met one. Just what I told you, what he saw from afar. Go ahead,
I
Don.
just wanted to highlight Eminem from M said the Civil War was being fought in Kansas years before the General War did. I think he's talking about the Bloody Kansas event. Is that
Bloody
something we
Kansas.
should bring up later on?
Yeah. Oh,
Do
yeah.
you want
We'll
to talk
look
about
into
that
that.
later?
We'll look into that. Yeah. And there's so much
That's
more,
worth.
too.
That is. I mean, there's so many
You
weird
got the
events
draft
and
wars in New York,
stories
the
and
draft riots in New
yeah,
York. Basically,
the
the
draft riot.
Irish were
Yeah,
like,
that's a whole
screw
other
this.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah. There
yeah.
was a lot of stuff.
Don't
Lots
worry,
and
we'll
lots of
get there.
stuff.
We'll get there. And
We're getting there.
people are talking about how Mary Todd kind of went insane. Oh, we'll get there. Don't worry.
We'll
We'll get to
there.
those stories.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
Now, her early life, I think it's, like I said that, but during that time, her stepmother actually called her the devil's limb. That's a rough thing to say about a kid. She's like the arm of the devil kind of thing, or leg, I guess. But, she found that if she threw fits, she could get attention. She was often throwing, fits and stuff like that. But did that mean she found out that if she threw fits, she'd get what she wanted or get attention? Or did she have a problem? Was she bipolar? Was she something else? And stuff we'll bring up later will actually tell you that. I am shocked at the stuff she got away with. But Lincoln didn't just allow it to happen. There's more to that. And I totally agree with you guys. That's the way it would look. But there was a lot of turmoil in the White House. Trust me. And at one point in time, he was sitting and talking with some trusted people and said, if I kick her out of here and send her home, this is going to that's all anybody's going to talk about. We have, number one with Lincoln, we have to maintain the stable union. The union must stand. It's either going to go, a house divided cannot stand. We're either going to go one way, or all the other. And that's the way he thought. So he would try to put, quietly send her off to New York to go shopping for whatever. And I can't even, I'm going to tell you the stuff that happened then, but later. Okay. So all kinds of things he tried. And he worried about it constantly. She would do things in public, and that's why nobody wanted to go to the play with her. Because she was a nutbag, and especially about that time. Toward the end, she'd already done like 4 years. So I mean, it's a lot. There's a lot that the things that this man put up with, and the things he was able to accomplish, with his cabinet against him and people pitting against him, and basically his own wife just undermining stuff, and the war and everything else. I don't know how he got the things done that he did. So he deserves that respect. Another reason he deserves a lot of respect, and when I started to dig on it, I was like, I knew I loved this man, and I'll tell you why. This is good. I love this. President Abraham Lincoln possessed extraordinary kindness of heart when his feelings could be reached, because he kept his feelings hid. When he was himself and laughing and enjoying things, it was at plays, as you saw depicted in the documentary, with his children on the floor playing with his children. That was one thing. They let their children be, it was nothing to see Willie coming down with his little cart attached to one of his pet goats going down the White House. They ran those servants nuts. The staff at the White House was just, oh my gosh, with these kids. But they believed in letting kids be kids, because it was too soon in a child's life that they would find themselves an adult and have to deal with the hell around them. So they let him, Yeah, Eminem, she was something. But was it conniving, or was it chemical imbalance? We're going to get into that. So, and again, it doesn't excuse it, but you know what I mean? And she lost a lot of children. The first one was Eddie, like at 4, and that's when she really started losing it. And then Willie died of I can't remember. There's so many diseases. But
typhoid, I believe it was.
Yeah, typhoid. Yeah. And Tad was sick at the same time. But when Willie died, that was it. She just lost it. And then of course Lincoln, and but anyway, so when he would show his happiness, it was always with animals. Here's a couple little stories. He beat the living hell out of these boys that were torturing these little tarpons that were defenseless. He wouldn't allow it. He once went back, got out of a carriage and walked back because there was a small piglet stuck in the mud, and everybody was going to leave it there. And he said, well, if you're not going to do it, I'm going back to do it. Right? They're on another carriage ride headed somewhere, and they're like, well, where's Lincoln's carriage? Everybody was just here, ready to go. And then the horse rider came up and told him, well, Lincoln, as he was going by, he heard some screeching, and some baby birds had fallen out of their nest. He got them out of the thicket and was wandering, trying to find the nest to put them back in. And when he came back, the carriage rider said, is everything okay? He said, yes. I returned the babes to the nest that their mother had built for them. This was Abraham Lincoln. This was Abraham Lincoln through his whole life. Now, when they left Springfield to go to the White House, it was such a long ride from Illinois to Washington, D.C. He had a beloved dog. Now, see if I can find this real quick for you so I don't mess up here. I know it's getting late, guys. Hang on. We're almost done. I believe... There he is. Fido. And Fido... basically, if you look back and you dig, it actually comes from the word faithful, which is why he named him this. And again, I talked to Donnie. I have no clue how they held these animals still. He's not dead. But there are these pictures that I'm about to show you are in the Lincoln Library Museum and have been verified, because I didn't believe them either. There's a lot of Photoshop stuff out there with Lincoln with pets on his lap and stuff. All that's Photoshopped. I don't care how real it looks. These are the real ones. These have been verified by the archivists. And there's some funny stories about the photographer, because they had the photographers there, and you know how long they had to sit still, right, to get a picture. And that's why you see so many blurry people. If you move, that was it, right? But this is how much he cared about his pet. This dog was always at his feet or on his lap when he ate. He just didn't, the fineries of things. He would do it when he had to, but when he was just himself and could let go, he cared more about children and animals than anything, really. So he would feed the dog at his feet, and most of the time the dog ate more than he did, and he ate first. This was his beloved dog. He said, now, they talked about it, it broke his heart, but they didn't think he was going to do well on the carriage ride. So there was a couple of boys that the dog really liked, and Lincoln went over and sat down and talked to them, shared an apple with them, like he said. You see that a lot, where he takes a slice, one for you, one for me, one for you. That was Lincoln did that a lot. And as he's talking to the boys, he said, "You must promise me that when he comes in with muddy paws, you will not scold him. He is just a dog and knows no better. That when he comes to the table, you will feed him, you will care for him, you will love him, you will speak to him and talk to him fondly, and remember me to him." And they took good care of him. I think he lasted till about 61 when he passed. But that's how much he cared about animals. Now, Seward, okay, the one we talked about that didn't like Lincoln, that's starting to like shine up to him a little bit, heard of the heartbreak that Lincoln was going through, and he gave him 2 kittens. Wait, no, it's not kittens. Wait a minute, I'll find it. Hold on. Oop, doo 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 doo. A little music. Doo 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 doo. Oh, where are they? Where's the babies? Is that them? There they are. Again, I don't know how they got these, but I heard from they were talking about it where in the archives where they have this, that the photographers, it was like an all-day thing trying to get, because these cats meant so much to Lincoln. This one here on the left is named Tabby, and the other one is named Dixie, for the song that Lincoln always loved. And when he gave that last speech where John Wilkes Booth was in the audience, above him and below him were 3 other conspirators, and we'll show you that picture as we go. The funny part about this is, in his own words, I'll just go ahead and read to you. Lincoln, who decided to leave his dog Fido home in Springfield, Illinois, when he was elected president, was given an unexpected gift of 2 kittens from Secretary of State William Seward. The president, thank you, doted on the cats, which he named Tabby and Dixie, so much that he once fed Tabby from the table during a formal dinner at the White House. With a gold fork, I might add. When Lincoln's embarrassed wife later observed that the action was shameful in front of their guests, the president replied, "If the gold fork was good enough for former President James Buchanan, I think it is good enough for Tabby." He also said this. Lincoln's friend Caleb Carmen recalled how the president would pick up one of the cats and talk to it for half an hour at a time. The cats apparently won the president over with their quiet adoration. At one point during his first term, Lincoln was said to have observed in frustration, "Dixie is smarter than my whole cabinet, and furthermore, she doesn't talk back." And Lincoln loved stray cats. If you could just imagine this for a moment. Lincoln had a special affinity for stray cats and was known to bring them home on occasion. Mrs. Lincoln even referred to cats as her husband's hobby. When she was visiting her father and stepmother in Kentucky, for example, Mary wrote in a letter to her husband that their son Eddie had taken up your hobby by adopting a stray kitten. This from Ulysses S. Grant. When he went to Richmond after Richmond fell and went through and went through the wounded and everything else and sat down with Grant. And that famous picture where you see that tent where they're all standing, this was that day. At General Ulysses S. Grant's headquarters in City Point, during the siege of Petersburg, in March 1865, just weeks before his assassination, Lincoln found his attention distracted by the sound of mewing kittens. Admiral David Porter wrote later that he was struck by the sight of the president tenderly caressing 3 stray kittens. It is well illustrated the kindness of the man's disposition and showed the childlike simplicity which was mingled with the grandeur of his nature. Porter recalled that Lincoln stroked the cat's fur and quietly told them, "Kitties, thank God you are cats and can understand this terrible strife that is going on." Before leaving a meeting in the officer's tent that day, Lincoln turned to a colonel and said, "I hope you will see that these poor little motherless waifs are given plenty of milk and treated kindly." That's your president, people. I'm just saying. So if anybody tells you that he didn't care about the wounded and dying after going night after night with Mary to the old soldiers' home and talking to the wounded and making sure they had what they could, he volunteered to change bandages on these soldiers. They didn't know what to do. They were amazed that he would spend this kind of time. And in fact, it was about 3 of those nights that John Wilkes Booth was sitting at the crossroads with his conspirators to kidnap Lincoln. They missed 3 times. They just kept missing each other because that was the original thing. They were going to kidnap him, take him to Richmond through an underground of safe houses to get him there and trade him for the prisoners being held by the Union. It didn't come forward. And once Richmond fell, there was no more kidnapping plot. And that's when the rest happened. So I had to share that with you. There is Tabby and Dixie. I think these are probably the only pictures I would say that are real because, again, they've been verified by this archive museum, and the stories about how the photographers were going crazy trying to get these pictures for Lincoln because the cats kept moving. But they must have had a moment because most of the pictures you see from animals back then, it was taxidermy. And it's horrible to think about, but this isn't. These are Lincoln's cats. So I thought I would share that with you guys. Donnie, anything to finish? There's Fido again. And then we've got all of the different things here happen. This man right here, Donnie, if you have anything, go ahead, because we're about to head out. Sorry it's so long, guys, but it was so much to get out, get you started.
Yeah, I don't know. I want to be careful not to say too much about.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is what I want to say. As far as I'm concerned at this moment, because I asked you guys what you thought, and everything, yeah, that's right, be kind. And, I'm so glad he had them to give him some kind of pleasure because, with his children, Willie, and he lost, and then he had Tad, and, he doted on his kids, and he's buried so many kids and so many people that he loved, he had that, and I love that about him. But this man right here, I've got my questions about. One of the things he wrote about when somebody asked Lincoln why Stanton's beard was so gray here and dark on the top. It would seem funny. And Lincoln looked over right in Stanton's face and said, "Well, that's easy to determine." He said, "Because he uses his mouth more than he uses his brains." But he called him his god of war. And he said, "I could not get through this without him." And I'm not even going to tell you the things that Stanton said about Lincoln. Not right now. But I can tell you this. As much as he thought of himself, and again, I could be wrong. I'm not, this is what I know so far, and I could change at the end of this series. And I don't know how you guys feel. But I will tell you this. I haven't seen too many memorials of Stanton, but I've seen quite a few of Abraham Lincoln. More books, more memorials, more roads, more highways, more colleges, more schools of this man, as it should be. Donnie?
Yeah, as far as Edwin Stanton is concerned, man, fuck that guy.
Mm-hmm. You see me doing this every time I see him because I don't even want the about it because, again, with that documentary. Now, if you want to go back and watch the documentary without all those little notification mistakes, I'm sorry. It's not a perfect podcast, but it's an honest one. And we try. And we really, 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 really enjoy you guys being here and getting all of your back, And if we could tell one person, is there anything we said tonight that was a surprise to you that you didn't know? Yep. Well,
there's going to be a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about with Stanton. Some surprising stuff. So
yes, be kind.
Yeah,
yes.
It's coming. Don't worry.
Quite literally.
Yeah. I just don't want to. I want to avoid spoilers.
Yeah, yeah. It's coming. And, a lot of the things you guys are saying here is true. The conspiracy part, absolutely, it's coming. It's all
Yeah, it's
coming,
coming.
honey. Yeah. Oh, the conspiracy part surprised you, Daryl? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, we haven't even started with
And
that
then
part yet.
Lincoln
Yeah.
had... Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Lincoln had a sharp wit, great sense of humor like JFK. You know what? Yeah. But he wasn't... He didn't... The woman thing was different. You know what I mean? JFK had his issues. We all know that. But yeah, and he tried to do right for the country. Lincoln didn't. JFK didn't want war, but we're gonna do that too. Yep. I learned so. Oh, let's see. Learned so many new things. Wow, this was great, guys. Well, I'm so glad. Yeah, he kind of did know about the conspiracy. A lot of people do because it was a little bit more profound because there's people hanging in the fort. You got Surratt and Harold and Lewis Payne, who was a mad dog killer, by the way. Lewis Payne. Somebody in here said something about he was retarded or he had something. He was actually, and I'll get into that more, but just to validate your statement there, he was wounded. I think he was shot in the head. It was grazed, but I want to look more into that. And he did escape a POW camp. He was a Confederate soldier, and his brother was shot, who he dearly loved. So, you got to, where's everybody coming from? You know what I mean? You're fighting out there and doing all this stuff. Yeah, you get caught up. And Booth was a great manipulator. And, first, two of the people that he got to help him with the kidnapping plot were early, school buddies that were like ne'er-do-wells and everything else and just needed the money. They weren't into it for the cause. They were just going along for the money. And once it went from kidnapping to something else, they were out of there. So we're going to deal with all that too. But yeah. I love the animal part. I love learning about the mother and finding out that she, the way they're saying she was poisoned. And then everybody thinks the dad did it or somebody else, that there's like boom, boom, boom. No, it was an act of kindness. She went to help people and drank the milk that they drank to get sick. So, it's makes a little bit more sense. And, it really falls into the whole makeup of Lincoln, how he got to be the man he was, and a little bit about the man he was. And I think that that's just absolutely fascinating to me. And Mary, the way she was. And we're going to get more into her. We're definitely going to tear up this conspiracy. I'm going to try to get Don Thomas in here to tell you about the diary and the findings. That thing was actually looked at again in 1977 by the FBI, and you can actually get that information online. It's available to anybody. Print it all out and go through it and read it, but it's a little difficult to read. What Don Thomas has gone through is actually put together, almost like a copy. So you can, and he explains everything in there, and it's quite fascinating, So we're really trying to uncover this whole thing, but my main thing tonight was to tell you a little bit about the man, because there's so much controversy in the war. Like I said, I lived in the South, I lived in the North, and in the South, it's still deep-rooted, everything, and that's not what he wanted. He said, let him up easy. When he spoke to Grant, I think he had not just the premonition that we're going to talk about later on, but I think he really knew something was going to happen, and that's why he brought Johnson in. Johnson never showed up to any cabinet meetings. He was drunk. He was a drunk, and but he listened to Lincoln, and he tried to fulfill his stuff. And something else I want to leave you with tonight that you can think about. Everybody keeps saying it's not about slavery, and he wanted to do this with the slaves and everything else, and I'm going to explain that more. But in the very beginning, he tried to bargain with the South and said, here's what I'll do. These people need to be free. This is wrong. And we will pay you for each freed slave. We will pay you for them, so we can set them free. And the South turned it down. They said no. So there was a lot of outs and everything else. And he sat there and wrote in his letter, it would have been so much life saved, so many people freed. And, it would have cost a lot less than this war. And all of these people wouldn't have died. So think about that. why was that stopped? So there you go. Donnie, take us out, babe.
We still got a lot to cover. There's a lot of detail that we glossed over that we're going to really tackle. And there's some surprising stuff that I think will surprise you, and it definitely surprised me. So, yeah, just hold on and stay tuned, and there will be more to come. I think this will be a fun ride.
Yeah, like I said, it's going to be like Amityville, where we do like a series of them. Steve is not feeling well, so please, please, please send him and Sandy. I think in their travels, they might have picked up a little something or cold or whatever. So if you could send him healing vibes. I know y'all saw a video tonight, but that was pre-recorded. He's really not feeling too good and probably won't be here tomorrow. We're going to try to come up with something for tomorrow night, and as you can see, I'm like wincing and stuff like that, but I'm not a big complainer. I have totally yanked my back. So that's why I keep moving like I'm doing. But I wasn't missing this tonight. And I agree, Sapphire Elf. I think slavery is such a touchy subject. It's hard to look at things in a rational context of the time it was in and who thought what without imposing our own moral value on them today. I agree 100%. That's why I'm going to the words he spoke. And then if I can, go back and get somebody else that was in the room or who he wrote the letter to or the back and forth to try to get the feel for it, and I'm really trying. Well, what you saw tonight absolutely is my opinion. I was honest about that. But I think going back and seeing what Lincoln went through and what he saw and how he treated animals and the kindness and there's so many stories. I picked a couple of just, helping children and the elderly and being honest and the things like that. You kind of have to take that with you, and he brought that with him. So I think it's important to keep that. If he had it with him, we have to consider all of that, So there you go. Okay? And, oh gosh, I'm so glad. Thank you, guys. I hope you like it. Yeah, Steve, I don't know. He hasn't really given me a final, but he says he doesn't think he's going to be able to do it. And if Steve says that, he's not feeling good. He doesn't just... You know what I mean? So please send him healing vibes. Anybody out there that needs healing vibes, we're sending them to you. Somebody said something about they were out of the cat's claw supplement. It's getting harder to get in it, guys. You know why? Because it works and the word's getting out. So, Donnie, wonderful. Did you learn anything tonight that you didn't know?
Oh, tonight?
Yeah.
Basically.
Anything that surprised you that you were like, wow,
Well, a lot of the stuff about Lincoln's early life, because I didn't really look into that so much. So, you told me about some of it, on the phone when we talked,
but you can kind of see where it weaves, like where it came from, and everything else. It's really coming together, guys. It's really something else. And I've never seen, I've seen a lot of documentaries like his early life or In His Words, and so many wonderful documentaries, so many wonderful movies. So if you're interested in this, again, I say, I will put the link for that documentary. There's others, Lincoln Under Fire, Sandberg's Lincoln with Hal Holbrook. We've lost Hal Holbrook. What a wonderful guy. Wonderful actor, really very from the old school of getting into it. And he was so into Lincoln that he said in a lot of ways he's seen people play Lincoln. He was disgusted by it because they never really researched him like he did. And again, that could just be, whatever. But if you've ever seen his one-man show, A Night with Mark Twain, you'll know what a great actor and how deep he was into the craft. And it's quite amazing. So that's a good one. It's also free on YouTube. Several other ones you gotta pay or stream. The Daniel Day-Lewis one. And, I've heard a lot of people saying about that they didn't really like his Lincoln. I don't think he did so bad. And and if you've ever seen that, you got to know the first 10 minutes are my favorite, because in that time that had some literary license to it. But I'm going to tell you this, that when Lincoln went to visit the soldiers, which he did often, and Donnie and I are going to come up and tell you that sometimes he was on the front lines directing things because he was tired of these generals. But that's another thing. That's another night. But in the beginning of Lincoln, the one that Daniel Day-Lewis plays, and wonderfully. Sally Fields plays Mary, probably one of the looniest, crazy ones that there is, and Mary Tyler Moore's. But the first 10 minutes, he's sitting on the on a wagon, and he's talking to the Union soldiers that are there and getting ready to muster out. And within those soldiers, there are some of the brand new freed black people that were always free, and the ones that came up and crossed the lines and joined the Union. And Lincoln was starting to go, oh, this is amazing, that everybody's working together. This is great. He had such great hope, and he saw it as they're standing there. He says, this is what the country can be. This is beautiful. And one of them came up and was talking about how they were still paid a little less and, everything else. And he says, I'm look into that. And he's writing everything down. And as they're speaking to him, one of the soldiers says that they were there at Gettysburg and saw him speak. And after you're talking to him, he's talking to this one, and this one guy was white. And he said, he said, did you hear what I said? And the guy said, yes. And he started to speak it 7 years ago. And he thought a minute, and the other guy tried to finish, and then he said a line, and then up comes the gentleman that happened to be black in Union uniforms and repeated the entire Gettysburg Address. And he was so moved. So moved. That actually happened, but it happened at a different place. And so many of them would come up and speak the entire thing to him. And he was absolutely floored by that. And it gave him the courage to go before his cabinet and say, let him up easy. I wanted to give the South $400 million toward the Reconstruction. And I think that's what got him killed, guys. Because they wanted to make the money. That's my thoughts. Donnie, this has been amazing. It's been a long one, and I love everybody that hung in here tonight. And I hope you really got something from it. We're just getting started. Donnie's digging, got the golden shovel, right, Donnie? Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm still waiting on my book. I ordered it, and it should be coming soon. And
yeah.
So my research hasn't even begun yet.
Did you pull one out of the middle of the tower, like that big Jenga tower of books?
Yeah, I found one that caught my eye, and I was like, oh, you look like you got something interesting to say. Yeah. Let's see what you got to say.
Yeah, don't forget. Yeah. This is quite amazing, guys. So if you want to read, there's a couple of books out there you can grab and look into this wonderful man, because I'll tell you what, I very distinctively put the United States Army Band singing the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Why? Because we're still United States. A house divided cannot stand. There are many parallels going on today. Let's try to remember that. We got to stand together and be one. We are one people. We should be celebrating the things that, being different is great. But we have so many common things. We just want to pursue happiness. We just want to be treated equal. We want to have free speech. We want to just raise our kids and, do the things that we do without hurting anybody else. Your rights, my rights. Let's keep a hold of them, guys. I love you all. Thank you for being here. Donnie, as always, an absolute pleasure, and this has been so much fun, and thank you guys so much. And for little Tabby and little Dixie, I'm doing one of these tonight, because I just thought that was so nice. Animals have brought us so much love, and for a man like that to it was just sweet. It was just really sweet. So thank you so much, guys. Good night, everybody. I'm going to try to come up with something tomorrow night. If I can get up and sit here, I'll do it. If I can't, we'll do a mystery together, and we'll all just lay in bed and listen to a mystery together. How's that sound? But we'll have something for you, right, Don?
We'll come up with something.
All right, guys.
Yeah.
Everybody take care. Keep your feet under the covers. Keep your closet door shirt. shut because I'm telling you, things go bump in the night. Good night, everybody.